East Hampton Town Board, we are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October 17th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Councilmember Burke Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilmember Lees.
Present.
Councilmember Overby.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Supervisor Van Square.
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting will begin with a public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. That will be followed by a presentation of bids by Jeannie Crows, our purchasing director. We'll have a senior center design development update with R2 architecture, Suffolk County Water Authority update on water usage and water issues, followed by the Eleanor Whitmore Early Childhood Development Center. We have Tim Frazier here, the executive director, tentative budget updates, and food scraps diversion pilot program wrap up. Then the final topic will be the renewable energy roadmap final draft, and that will be with our own Samantha Klein from Natural Resources, followed by liaison reports. And we do have a few resolutions to approve today. Carol, do we have anyone signed up to speak? I'll take by a show of hands. Anyone who wishes to address the board? Yes, David Buda. And Steve, I'll get to you next.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So on the way to Montauk this morning to play pickleball, I took note of the fact that the four-way stop intersections on Abrams Path at Accabonac Road and at Town Lane, which are often heavily traveled, especially in the summer when Town Lane becomes a bypass, work very well. People are courteous, people are considerate, people have learned their lessons about how to get along and play well. And why did I bring this up? I didn't watch the whole meeting, but I read the newspaper articles about the proposal for a traffic oblong at Long Lane and Stephen Hand's Path. And I thought to myself, why doesn't the town board save a lot of money and energy and try first the simplest solution, a four-way stop intersection, especially because I understand the state's in the process of expanding the intersection at 114 and Stephen Hand's Path to add turning lanes. At this time of year, as an effort, you could try putting in those four-way, make it a four-way stop intersection, which will, of course, obviously create greater safety, and avoid perhaps a $500,000, $1 million expenditure of highway funds for a project that, frankly, looks like a sore thumb sticking in the face of the statewide area of scenic area of local significance that is known as Hayground area. Why don't you, I didn't hear a discussion about why you haven't tried the easier solution. I remember when there was a discussion about doing something about the traffic, improving traffic flow along Stephen Hand's Path, when it enters into or intersects with Old Northwest Road. At first, there was a plan to put in a traffic circle, and then someone said, hey, wait a minute, a lesser alternative might work just as well, and it has. Instead, they made that intersection between Stephen Hand's Path and Old Northwest Road, they made that they reconfigured the acute angle to make it a 90-degree angle and relocated the stop sign, and that intersection now works beautifully. So my question is, and I used to drive through that intersection, the subject intersection, every day for 8 years when I worked in Sagaponack, and I know it well. And I think that a four-way stop intersection, will, at least a trial, is the first alternative, the best alternative, the lesser intrusion, the lesser expense, and the town should give it a shot now, especially during the off-season, see how it works, see if it works well enough to avoid a major construction project that frankly looks bizarre on paper, the oblong nature, trying to squeeze it. It's like trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole, or more of an oblong pole into a square hole, or whatever. Give it a shot. Give it some thought. Why hasn't it been given a trial? I think that would be the first thing to do, the smart thing to do, and I ask you to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dad. I'd just say that we did review this actually several years ago, and it was determined that the volume of traffic coming from Route 114 and south of 114 on Stephen Hands is such a high volume that if you put a stop sign at that intersection, it would likely back up and actually gridlock 114. So I'm just saying it's been looked at by those.
Theory.
Excuse me, may I? May I just complete my thought? Thank you. It's been looked at by those who have great expertise, highway engineers, calculating the volumes, and it's been determined that a four-way stop there would cause gridlock. And so that's why we've moved on with this plan. So far, I've heard only from you as to any negativity about the plan. We've had a great deal of public support thus far via email and whatnot. So I think this is the best solution to this particular intersection. And I'm glad to hear that Abraham's Path is working well.
Right. Well, all I'm going to say is that sometimes the engineers' projections don't pan out. Engineers are not perfect. And this is such a simple, cost-effective solution to try something.
Well, the other thing I would say is that traffic patterns are not something that we generally try. If you put a four-way stop there and then you decided to remove those signs, I think, you've gone through changing. How do you go back once you've started? So you find that after putting in a four-way stop, it causes gridlock, and then you want to remove those signs to alleviate the gridlock. Now you have people thinking that the people coming the other way are going to stop. So they're sitting at the stop sign, they pull out. That's a problem. So, we don't want to establish patterns that we're then going to change while we wait to put in a circle.
Try it, you'll like it.
Thank
And if
you.
it
I don't
doesn't
think
work,
we will.
you can
I'm
undo
going to
it.
respectfully disagree.
Yeah, usually when they do a four-way stop, it's a prelude to a traffic light. Which again will back up traffic. So I think it's important to keep traffic moving in that area because the volume is just too high.
The volume is not much different than it would be on Abrams Path at Town Lane.
Again, I
That's a major-
respectfully disagree with you, David.
Yeah.
I don't think you're familiar with this intersection.
As I said, I drove it every day for 8 years.
It's much higher, and there's a school
Yeah.
involved as well.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you for your comments. Steve?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Stephen Mahoney. I live on Long Lane, and I'm in agreement about this traffic circle or oblong or whatever. I think that the roundabouts that have put in the areas around the South Fork have worked out really well. I think that it is less stopping and starting and probably uses less fuel. But that's beside the point. What I really wanted to ask you is whether you've considered the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit on Long Lane as it feeds into this proposed roundabout and how that affects it. I know that traffic calming needs to be done on Long Lane and coming down Stephen Hans Path. Now there are more residents and businesses on Long Lane than when that 45-mile-an-hour speed limit was enacted decades ago. There's just a relatively short stretch, which is kind of weird when you go from 30 to 45. And it's a time when everybody wants to step on the gas. And Sunday afternoons, you get some McLarens and some motorcycles and everything, and they want to rip it up. And, I know back in the day that when there was one police officer on duty at night, somebody would make a call in Amagansett, and then they'd set it up with the quarter mile right on Long Lane. So, I think that that's sort of a thing in the past, especially since the pandemic. There's been a lot more pedestrian traffic, people walking 2 and 3 across, people riding bikes. So I just think it really bears some attention as you're looking at this in a holistic manner. All these other roads are 30 or 35 miles an hour that feed into that roundabout.
So just to answer that, Steve, I don't disagree with you. It has become a racetrack particularly, but it's a county road. So when they went from concrete to asphalt recently, there used to be a racetrack on that road a long time ago, but this has now been more modern racetrack.
Yeah.
We are going to be exploring that and also requesting that from the county. That would be something that we would like to come out of this too.
Yeah, I know that the town does maintain it for the county, and this is really an isolated road. I know that the other county roads that are a little less isolated in this town, like Springs Fireplace and 3 Mile Harbor, they have sections. I haven't really looked at the speed limits on there, but I know that there's 30 and 35 mile an hour speed limits on those sections. I just think that now is really the perfect opportunity to really look at that and address this, because there's not, how many 45 mile an hour speed limits are there in this town besides the state highways? And even on the state highways, in 114 now was reduced from 50 or 55 to 45 when they did recent, well, it might not even be that recent, but they did lower that speed limit. They also took out passing lanes. It's a trend that's happened because of the volume of traffic we have here. But I really don't know if there is a 45 left on 3 Mile Harbor or Springs Fireplace, and those are both county roads.
Yeah, so if I could just address that, there are 40 mile an hour speed limits on both Springs Fireplace Road and 3 Mile Harbor on the county portion.
Right.
A year or two ago, we reduced the speed limit on the town portion of 3 Mile Harbor. It came up when I was liaison to the Springs CAC, and we reduced it to 30.
Right.
So it's been a trend because of,
right.
as you
So-
say, because of the volume and the amount of people here.
And that section of 3 Mile also becomes quite narrow and curvy. Long Lane is perfectly straight, and
Shotgun.
one whole side really doesn't have any access. It's all farm field. And so I know people are, anxious to go a little faster here. I'm not sure a speed limit change will impact whether or not people actually abide by the speed limit. But I do think that's a consideration, especially now as we look at redoing that intersection.
It would give the police department more tools to, really to calm things down.
Right.
Because
I
we all
tried.
know 45 will give you 55.
Right.
So, well, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and commenting today, Steve. Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Conley. My family and I have had the good fortune of living on Long Lane for 40 years. We've also had the good fortune of avoiding an accident while trying to cross Stephen Hand's path. And I agree with Stephen, Sunday afternoon drag races, but that's not the priority. I mean, I'll take the drag races. Please, I think you have a beautiful plan. It's one man's thumb is a beautiful design, okay? So we really need it. And a four-way stop sign, it'll be bravest man goes first. So, so thank you very much. And I think your plan is beautiful. It fits in with the agricultural nature. And thank you for
Thank you for coming in, Maureen.
bye-bye.
Anyone else in the room like to address the board? I'll go to the phone lines if not. Jason, do we have any callers on the line?
We have no callers on the line.
A last call for public comment? Okay, we can now move on. We'll have Jeannie Carosa. Here to present bids. Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning. I have several bids to accept this morning. First, we have the salt barn for the Highway Department, Veritas Construction Services Incorporated, in the amount of $888,000 is the apparent low bidder. Next is the Gann Road Pump Out Station Improvements. Philip Ross Industries is the apparent low bidder at $191,000. Second House Sanitary Upgrade is the next bid to accept. Keith Grimes, Inc., in the amount of $117,000 is the apparent low bidder. Also going to accept permits for the town clerk. Montauk Printing, EOC Print, and Concept Print are the apparent low bidders for those. A pickup truck for Marine Patrol, Otis Ford, is the apparent low bidder in the amount of $36,185. And a couple of extensions. The first is the professional auditing and accounting services for the town. Naraki Smith has agreed to extend. And lastly is the extension of the airport concession services. Outfront Media is the vendor for that one. And that's it.
Any questions for Jeannie?
No.
Thank you, Jeannie. That brings up now the Senior Center Design Development Update with R2 Architecture, and Council Member Gonzalez is the liaison to this project. Kathy, you want to give us an
Yeah, well,
introduction?
Jason, could you please let in, I believe there's probably 6 team members on there.
Right now, I currently have 10 people in the waiting room, but I have R2 and I also have Energy. So,
So it's just our 2 folks. It should be Carol, Renette, Yumi, Steve, Lena.
all right. So Yumi's in. Carol. I have Carol Ross Barney. Is that the same?
Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
Steve. Stephen So. TSOU. Correct.
Yes, please.
And let's see. And who else would we have in there? Elena. Lena. Elena's being admitted right now.
Renette should be there.
Renette. I don't, but I have one thing that says iPhone. So, wait, no, there's Renette. There's Renette. Okay.
That's probably Renette.
Okay. No, and then I have Renette joining, and I also have iPhone joining. So there's that.
And
as
is
well.
there Shinya?
Yep, Shinya.
Great, please.
Okay. And then after that, I think that should sum it up, because I think the rest of them are for, unless Daniel Dubois, I believe.
Oh, that's
No.
Suffolk County Water Authority.
Understood. Very, very good. Okay. That is currently what I have, but if anyone has anyone else to join, just let me know and I'll have them added in.
Can you pull them up, though?
I will pull them up right now. I was in the middle of taking care of that. Let's
Thank
go
you.
and push this up.
Okay, great.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Is everybody on your team there that's supposed to be in the meeting? Can you just take a quick look? Yeah, everybody's there? Great. So I just, we have probably a 45-minute to an hour presentation in front of us. So I'm going to just, go to Renette and Carol to get the ball rolling and introduce your team members if you would, and then we can get started.
Good morning. I'm Carol Ross Barney, and today we have the design development presentation for you for the Senior Center. It'll look really familiar. It's development of work that you've previously seen. And basically what we've done is we've taken it the step farther, selected materials and systems. And so this is really bringing you up to date. We can jump right in. I will introduce the people on our team. Actually, Kathy, you've sort of introduced them already, but we have Yumi, Lena, who will be making most of the presentation, Shinya, Ronette, and I don't see Steve, but I think he's there. So if we can share our presentation, we can start.
Great.
Yes, let me know when you all see the screen.
Oh, it's perfect. It's up.
I see it. If you
Okay.
could go into presentation mode, though, we will be having a
Yes.
perfect feed.
All right, 1 second. How is that?
There
Awesome.
you go.
All right, perfect. Okay, so like Carol said, it's been a little bit since we talked to you all. You'll see a lot of familiar things.
Lena, could
but
you just
then-
speak a little louder, please?
Yeah, yeah. So you guys will see a lot of familiar things, but what we've really done is kind of button up and massage things a little bit more with some of the feedback that we've gotten from Kathy and Diane and their team. So because it's been a little bit.
Could you just take it, Lena, could you just stop for a minute? I don't know if it's your mic that it's not coming through loud and clear, or if it's, should be turning up the volume on the, here in the.
Let me turn up my mic as well, maybe.
Okay, that'd be great.
Does that help any?
Yes,
Better.
yes.
Okay. All right. There we go. Okay, so everyone can hear me?
Yes, perfect,
Perfect.
thank you.
All right. So like I was saying, as Carol mentioned, some of this will look familiar, but you'll see that we've kind of massaged it, added a little bit more detail as we've been going through the design development phase. So what we first wanted to do is just remind everybody where we are at and where we came from. And so where the origin of this design really came from was all of those community engagement sessions that we had back last year. And so out of those, came major themes and then also major goals that the town had. So there were these major themes of a big connection to nature and the outdoors. How can the building provide for activities that it currently has in its program, but also can it build on that existing center and provide new programs? Definitely having spaces that are dedicated to the arts, but also spaces that are dedicated to wellness. Really focusing in on the dining room as a space for social interactions. And then also, as we dive deeper, where can those social interactions happen elsewhere within the building? Looking at our design, not only for the building, but also its site opportunities. We have a very interesting shaped site, but also it's interesting that it's in the middle of the woods. So how can we kind of incorporate that? Of course, making an environmentally conscious facility was really high up on everyone's mind. And then also a facility that, shows appreciation for the staff and has all of the program that they need as well. So the goals that came from those themes were making this a home away from home for both the seniors and the staff. That net zero energy. And I know we've been talking about that a lot every time we meet with you guys. And I think as we've gone through more in design development, we'll start to kind of ping on exactly what we're looking at when we say net zero energy. Also providing a facility that's open, having a space for lectures, seminars, learning, but also those wellness things. So engaging kind of the mind, body, and soul. And then going all the way, to things like having ample parking, having enough parking for people, but also having it, close walking distance for seniors. And then, some of the goals of having some additional program, like maybe a coffee bar, a little place to eat, outdoor areas for people to exercise and gather. And so we just wanted to show this list and then remind everybody that we didn't just come up with this on our own. This is straight from the data that we presented earlier in the year and last year. And this came from residents of the area, users of the current space, community members, elected representatives, and the staff. And so where we left off, the last time we talked to you guys was the end of schematic design. And so we had decided on the windmill option, but we had all noted that there were definitely areas that we needed to dive a little bit deeper into. So looking into the building details, we were starting to kind of show some imagery, but how does that actually work together? How does the construction actually go together? Reviewing, an exterior palette as well as an interior palette, and then coordinating the plan. We had a schematic plan set, which you'll see it's still pretty similar, but making sure that that floor plan matches with how the building systems work and how the building operates. And then the goals for the next presentation were, to refine the plan in any ways that we could, look for any efficiencies and, any areas of potential cost reduction, but always with every choice that we make, keeping that net zero goals and the sustainability goals in mind. And so talking a little bit more into those sustainability features, like I said before, each presentation we touch on them, but we thought it might be a good idea now that we've started to really narrow them down to include a slide to talk about those. And so we've been thinking of things for both the site and the building. They kind of intertwine within each other to provide an entire sustainability holistic approach. And so you'll see things as small as looking at native landscaping, making sure that there's no permanent irrigation, that when we are designing plants, they're native forbs and grasses, all the way to a little bit larger material, things like looking at paving materials and the use of concrete instead of asphalt to reduce heat island. In the building, looking at things like triple glazed windows so that we have a robust thermal envelope to help with those net zero goals, all the way to a little bit larger items like a closed loop geothermal to help as the main mechanical system. And then looking at, where interior kind of goes into that as well. Can we use wood paneling to kind of bring in that warmth, that nature feel? And so going into the site design a little bit more. So this is the site plan that we've been showing you guys kind of all along, but what we've done is added a little bit more detail each time. And so starting here at the beginning, off Abraham's Path, you can see that now we're looking at providing some sort of entry sign. In the design development phase, we're looking into designing that as you're going down the road, something as a signifier to see that the senior center is here. We're also starting to look at how our site could have future connections to the Terry King Ballfield site that's next door. Still continuing to show the overflow parking that could be for users that don't mind walking a little bit further or for the Terry King site. And then one of the biggest things you'll notice as a difference between the last site plan we showed and this one is we're showing a concrete drive and parking. The last time we talked, there was a concern on the maintenance of the gravel drive that we showed. And so we've now changed that to concrete. We're using concrete instead of asphalt, like I stated before, because it's got, it reduces the heat island effect and it doesn't have all of the oils and contaminants that asphalt drives have. Another big thing that we've really started to button up on the site plan is the terrace garden stone seating. So we've started to massage that, and that's going to actually help us hold back the hill because our site is kind of in a bowl. And we've been working with the civil engineers, and because we have the terrace garden and coordinating with them, we actually are reducing to almost no retaining walls on site. So we're really happy about that. The only areas that we do need retaining walls as of now are just to hold back a little bit of this hill around the transformer and generator. But we feel with landscaping and some trees that we can hide that. So we're pretty happy about that. Also, the last time we spoke, our walking trails, I think were just green dashes signifying where these could be. And now we've started to kind of rework those into what these trails would actually look like in site. So we have 3 trails. The first would be an ADA walking trail on the lowest portion of the site. This would be, the lowest difficulty. Anyone could really use this. And then we're proposing 2 other walking trails. One that kind of goes up the hill to provide a little bit more difficulty, and then another one that potentially wraps around the site to provide just a little bit longer of an experience. We're also starting to look at areas where maybe outdoor workout equipment could be incorporated. And then, of course, looking into providing ADA parking for this design. We're actually providing over the code required minimum for ADA parking just because of the nature of it being a senior center. We're also starting to coordinate where electrical vehicle charging stations would be, again, keeping those sustainability goals in mind. And then also looking at the landscape plan, this works in tandem with the site plan. But now what we've started to do in the design development phase is actually pick out specific, trees, grasses, and different species. There's been conversation on how these plantings will look in the different seasons. And what we've tried to do is pick trees and, bushes and grasses that will change as the weather changes. But what we've done currently is stick to native forbs and grasses. So if there is interest in specific species that aren't native, we're open to that too. But right now we're sticking with the town standard native species. So then looking at a little bit more zoomed in on the site, we're starting to define some of the site elements. So on the left here, you can see the site lighting poles. And the idea behind this is we want to provide enough lighting to where someone can safely get, from the parking lot to the building, but also still thinking in mind and complying with the town's dark sky requirements. So you can see down here on the lower left image, we're looking at a lighting pole that has a very light touch on the site. And you can see here it blends in very nicely. So that's why we're thinking of products like this. On the right, you can see we're looking at some of the bollards. We do have this shared street approach that we'll talk about a little bit later without a curb. And so just looking at some elements that also kind of blend in, but also provide a little bit more protection for pedestrians and possibly incorporating lighting within those as we move into the next phase of design. So we also include in this presentation quite a few renderings of how the space has evolved, how the site has evolved. And so here you can see we have a bird's eye rendering. And so you can see over here on the right, some of the trails that are peeking through. On the left, you can see some of those PV canopies that are on the northern side of the site. We also have some on the southern side of the site, and that will help provide some of the energy to reach those net zero goals. Another thing that this view shows really well is the drop-off sequence. And so you can see a car can easily just kind of swing right here, drop off under the covered awning, and then swoop right into the parking. We also wanted to include a view that's approaching the building. So because our lot is shaped kind of like a flag, the first portion, you're kind of going up the pole of the flag. And so this would be right as the site opens up and you're able to see the building. And so you're on a little bit higher of an elevation and you start to see the building kind of peek out. On the left here, you can see these are those PV canopies that I talked about a little bit earlier. They provide energy for the building, but then also provide a little bit of covered parking in case someone is interested in that. And so then, we go down the main drive over to the main entry. This is where you can really see that shared street approach that we talked about before. What's really nice about this is that there's no curb, so it kind of reduces any tripping hazards that might occur with the seniors. You can walk straight from the paved path we have from the parking down right into the entry of the building. And so then another thing that was discussed heavily during the design development phase was the drop-off. And, just the need to make sure that when a car goes underneath the covered awning, that they are both protected on the passenger side as well as the driver's side. And so because we have this kind of folding nature of our roof, we have been looking into how we can add some facets and folds so that a car can now go completely under the awning and both the driver and the passenger are protected. This would also be the case for the buses, the minibuses that come and pick up some of the seniors, as well as fire trucks. So there shouldn't be any issue with larger vehicles hitting the awning or anything. And then the next image we're showing is the activity lawn. To keep with some of those sustainable goals, we're actually providing minimal lawn that actually needs mowing and maintenance. We have the one, as you saw on the site plan, at the very front of the building. This is more of an entry lawn. This is where the flagpoles could be part of the entry sequence. And then the only other one is this small activity lawn on the back side of the building. This is coming out. You can see here where the mouse is. That's the dining. So as the dining kind of bleeds out into the lawn, you can imagine on a nice day, maybe some people are playing bocce ball or croquet. And we're thinking, maybe there could be programs added to the current center now that there's this outdoor space that allows for it. And so leaving a little bit of the site and zooming into the building design, One of the things we started doing and touched upon it a little bit in schematic design is looking at the building facade and the materials that we were thinking about. And so one of the first things we did was look into some of the existing and, very prevalent materials that are in East Hampton. And so our research first brought us to some of the potato barns that are in the community. And you can see here from these images on the right, they consist of these barns that have, are often covered in shingles and have these faceted roofs that kind of slope all the way down to the ground. We also noticed that a lot of the buildings in town are comprised of wood shingles as well. And so we started to look at that and see how could we have a new take on an old material. And so we started to look at this stainless steel metal shingle. It has a lot of the same properties as a wood shingle. They're shingles that are overlapping, smaller pieces that make up a total of a bigger hole on the building, but they just have a little bit less maintenance and a little bit more durability. There's also, we've included a few images on the right. There's this really nice dynamic quality that we find in these shingles. You can see the top image is a building in Chicago in the summer, and the bottom is the same building in the winter. And so the building kind of has this dynamic look, and it changes throughout the seasons and even the time of day. And so one thing, we are recommending the stainless steel metal shingle as the exterior material. And, one thing that we've also talked about in design development is what's the color going to be? How shiny is this going to be? And what we think would be really nice is colors that emulate the woods and the forest around it. So some golds, some bronzes. We also think that, our options are pretty open for this, and that in the next phase is moving forward in construction documents, we can start to work with you guys. What is a range of colors that you guys feel comfortable with? Then we can narrow that down even more. Do we want it to be shiny? Do we want it to be matte? And so there's a lot of options. It doesn't have to be as shiny as what you're seeing in these images. This just shows you kind of what the material could be. You can also see on these bottom two images, this is just the difference between night and day on the site. And so the image on the right, you're starting to see it's reflecting the trees around it, it's reflecting the sky around it. And then the image on, the image on the right over here, it's more of reflecting some of the site lighting. You can see the dark sky is reflected. And so the building really does consistently change. Another exterior material we're looking at over here is a concrete panel. We think this is very durable for the project. It also would be lining kind of the knuckles of the windmill. And this just signifies some of the entry points for the users. And so we started to look at, the two materials that we talked about last time, which was, the metal shingles that I just talked about, as well as the Shoshugiban charred wood shingles. And we just wanted to provide a material matrix highlighting why we are recommending the stainless steel metal shingles. So they're just a little bit more durable because they are the stainless steel. They're corrosion resistant. They're a little bit more resistant to lichen or mold growing on them. Unlike traditional wood shingles are. While both products do have little maintenance, the metal shingles have just a little bit less maintenance due to the fact that for wood shingles you do have to re-oil them every 5 years. You have to keep up with them. Both products are very sustainable. Of course, we wouldn't offer anything that wasn't, but the metal shingles are just a little bit more sustainable. And what we've done our research on is, we know this building isn't getting LEED certification, but when you look into LEED, it really does break down a lot of materials and what qualifications they're hitting. And so we looked at things like solar reflectance, how they degrade with time, the carbon footprint, heat gain, and also bird strike likeliness. And we think that the metal shingles just win out just a little bit more on that. Lifespan, they're both very similar in lifespan. The only reason the metal shingles has kind of a half hourglass more is because there's little to no maintenance to get it to that lifespan. Like we said before, the wood shingles, they do have to be re-oiled. They do have to be maintained in order to reach their long lifespan. And the costs we're seeing are coming in about the same. And so We also wanted to include this detailed material matrix. The one before I showed was just high level, kind of pulling out the information, but this one really goes in depth. This is all the research we did to lead to that more high level matrix. So you can see the durability information, the maintenance, a little bit of the manufacturers or the quick facts, and then just zooming in a little bit on the bird strikes, because that was something that was talked about heavily in schematic design. We reached out to the metal panel manufacturer, and they have not had any issues with bird strikes. And this is because the shingles are smaller panels. So the surface is actually broken up where every shingle exists. And also because it's not a direct mirror, it's not an exact reflection. It's kind of a warped reflection. And so a lot of times with bird strikes, that's happening on glazing where it's lit beyond. So the birds aren't able to tell that the glass is there and they run into it. But with the metal shingles, because it has more of a warped reflection, there isn't a lighting element behind it, they're not seeing issues with this. So we don't believe that will be a problem. All right, and then going into the overall floor plan, this is very similar to what we talked about before. We've just started to kind of button up some of the plan elements in talking with Kathy and Diane. And so one of the things you can see is starting at the vestibule, we've actually pushed that inward to the building. That's going to help us get that covered overhang for both the driver and the passenger. In the office wing, things are pretty similar here. What we did do is switch the MDF room with the nutrition office. In talks, we feel like pushing the nutrition office back a little bit is going to give her a little bit more space, a little bit more quiet to get her tasks done. And then also having the MDF room, which holds a lot of the tech equipment and IT equipment, a little bit closer to the center, that's going to reduce our runs for all of those wires in the building. So we kind of saw that as a win-win situation. Also, the last time we talked in front of the board, I think, we had the conference room and the break room switched. So we've actually reversed those. And now the conference room and the director's office have these great views outside of one of the wing walls. And the break room now has a door that's covered by the awning and could lead right out to the outdoor seating or even the outdoor terrace and walking trails. Moving on to the wellness wing. This is also pretty similar, just kind of buttoning up a few things. We've started to right-size some of the electrical rooms and the storage rooms, adding cubbies for the wellness room, and then you'll see a little bit later, started to kind of massage those corridor designs to incorporate some built-in seating. Looking at the dining, that's still the main space of the building, kind of the heart, and it's still separated from the lobby by a full-height partition wall. The dining is also connected to the main men's and women's restrooms, but we've also added a door from the lobby to those so that, a senior is always, or a staff member is always close to a restroom if need be. And then down here on the south side of the building, we've been working with Diane and her team on the commercial kitchen and what's needed there. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then kind of working with the mechanical engineers to right size that room. It looks large from this plan, but because we're going with closed loop geothermal, this is actually the space we need for that. So during this process, we've been working with them to, make sure that we're using as minimal footprint as possible, but still have all the clearances and still have the room that they need to get the equipment in. And so we've also included an overall MEP design. Last time we talked with a lot of maintenance and grounds folks, and they had a lot of questions. And so we just wanted to show here that we have a pretty simple system with 3 ERVs, 1 in each wing, that will be serving each wing and then also blowing air into the main dining space. And so this kind of shows how we're going with our concept. We've been showing these renderings of this main space without any ducts or conduit. And what we're really trying to do in these next phases is minimize any intrusions into that ceiling. We want to keep the space as we're showing it currently in the renderings without all of these ducts coming into it. And so zooming, a little bit farther into the interiors, we started looking at what our interior palette could be made up of. And looking a little bit into the main dining space, we've started to look at this acoustical dowel laminated timber product. And, one of the big conversations that we've had also during design development is making sure that seniors can sit at a table and hear a conversation that's happening at their own table. And so we've been working really closely with an acoustical consultant, sending them our model, sending them which products we're looking at, and they've been kind of running tests. And because this product here has this profile that I'm highlighting a little bit on the right, it actually helps trap the sound. And so we feel pretty confident that this dowel laminated timber will provide really good acoustics in the dining room. It also serves multiple purposes as it is the structural deck. So instead of, having a structural material and then having to clad it with another material and provide acoustics, this kind of does it all in one. And so we really like that. It also provides, that warmth of the wood and kind of that nature feel that we've been trying to bring into the space. And so then looking at the interior materials for the walls, we're trying to continue with that warmth. And so what we've been looking at is having wood paneling line the walls, mostly in the main dining space, but also kind of bringing that a little bit into the corridors as well. We really like the texture that this brings, the warmth. It kind of calls back to that sustainability and those net zero goals that we have also. And so here's just one more slide. The large image here just shows kind of the palette that we were thinking about. In the past couple presentations, we talked about having polished concrete as a floor, but in more talks with Kathy and Diane's team, we just think that that might not be the best surface for seniors to be walking on. And so what we're proposing now is a linoleum floor. It'll provide a little bit less hardness, a little bit softer of a walking surface for staff and seniors. We're also looking at the possibility of having wood in the wellness room, maybe as an alternate, seeing how costs come in for that. And then also looking at possibly having carpet in the office wing. And so now we kind of zoom into each portion of the plan, talk about any changes that we have there. You'll see in the lower left, we have a key plan, so you can always kind of orient yourself to where you are within the windmill. And then these little diagrams here will be showing a lot of renderings or perspective views. And so this is just if you were a person, it shows kind of like your field of vision for reference. And so here you can see in the vestibule and lobby, we're starting to think about how the furniture could be laid out. We want this to be, soft seating, cafe seating. Maybe seniors now come early for classes to have these social interactions. And this can be kind of a space of social gathering. We also have the senior citizen leader here. Right when people come out of the vestibule, they can come see her and talk to her if they have any questions. So this is the view right as you're coming in. You've just walked through the vestibule and you're looking face on into the dining room. You can see the floor to ceiling wood partition that goes all the way up. You can see the timber beams starting to cut through that partition and really keeping the idea, going back to that slide one we showed of the goals of having it being open, having it be connected to nature. You can start to see out each one of these, knuckles of the building. And so on one side, you're looking out onto the lawn. On the other side, you're looking out onto the terrace seating. And it's small in this image, but what we're also starting to represent is possibly having some art or photo hanging walls. And so, we have these large expanses of these wood paneled walls. Could this be an opportunity to display senior art? Could it be an opportunity to display local artist art? And so I think as we go into the next phases, we can start to see, dive a little bit more into those details and see what we need. This is an image of the cafe. So if you were to come into the vestibule and then turn left, you would see this area. Just as kind of a disclaimer, we are showing the furniture as just like a gray or solid white. What we want to get at this point in the design is, show the main design of the building and of all of the spaces. We believe that once we bring in the furniture, we can have the furniture match the space. But really, we just want to get the overall atmosphere of the space to show out in these renderings. And so here you can see we have a cafe counter. We're thinking this could actually incorporate seating. Maybe it could be a laptop counter. This is a spot where coffee would be set out and maybe snacks for the seniors. Then jumping over to the wellness swing on the east side of the plan. What we've done here is keep a lot of the same spaces, make sure we're hitting all of those necessary square footages that we need, but just kind of massage them a little bit. So you can see here in the wellness room, we're now providing little cubbies and storage space for seniors and instructors to put some of their belongings. We're still providing the 3 single-user toilet rooms. There was talk about having these outside near the wellness and the game rooms in case a senior needs to go to the restroom. It's just a short walk. These can also double as changing rooms if a senior comes early to a class. We'll talk about it a little bit in a little bit later on in a few slides, but what we've also done is look at the corridor design. And so we've started to kind of open up the corridor at some of the game room, media room, and other program entrances. So this is kind of helping us with not having one long hallway that it feels like you're kind of walking down a tunnel. We're kind of opening it up and forming these portals into the space. We've also started to incorporate some built-in bench seating. Maybe if a senior arrives early or if they want to stay after a class and, talk or socialize, we were thinking this could be some spaces for that. And so here's kind of what I was talking about with the corridor design. The image on the left is if you were to take our model and just kind of remove the roof off of it. You can see that we've started to kind of open up these corridors on either end to these entrances that help kind of, help with the space. We've also added some clear story windows. That's going to help get light into some of these corridors. So even though they're not on an exterior wall, they're still hitting some of those goals of open, light-filled. The incorporation of some of the wood paneling along the corridor also kind of brings that nature element in as well. And then the image on the right here is just the perspective looking down that corridor. You can see the allusion here to some of those built-in benches. And then also on the corridor, we're thinking this long wall could also be used to display senior art, local art. Where can we incorporate that into the facility as well? And so this is an image into the wellness room. The wellness room has been positioned, on one of those end walls. So we're envisioning, you could take a yoga class and you're really just looking out into the forest beyond and how that could be really relaxing. We've started to incorporate elements like a ballet bar in case seniors are interested in that for stability. And then also you can see here, looking at open cubbies. I think last time we showed closed lockers and there was some conversation about how easy it is to leave stuff in a closed locker. And so we're starting to narrow down the design every time we work on it and kind of take that feedback and see what items we can fix. Moving into the office wing on the western side, like we said before, the northern end of this wing hasn't changed too much, besides the switch of the MDF room and the nutrition office. And then you can see here the director's office and the conference room are right along this nice wing wall. So they're going to get really beautiful views out onto the site and the landscaping. So this is a view as you come back in through the main entry and you're going to turn right. So you're kind of walking towards the office wing. You can see here is the senior citizen leader. One of the other big things we've been talking about throughout the design development process is how to make sure that the senior citizen leader is in a place where she can be well seen as soon as people enter. And so we think that a few small moves can help this. So what we've done is kind of pull out her station and put it at a little bit of an angle. And we think that does just enough to kind of pop her out. Also, providing a little bit of a wall. Maybe this could be a cork wall. Maybe this could be East Hampton Senior Center signage. So starting to look at a little bit further into the details every time we present. And then also a view into this conference room. We keep talking about how these end walls will have these beautiful views. So we wanted to kind of show that. you can imagine being in a meeting and you're kind of feels like you're sitting out within nature. We also wanted to point out that you'll see these overhangs in all of these views. What we've been doing is working closely with a sustainability consultant to make sure that we're pulling out these overhangs to provide the correct amount of shading and reducing glare wherever possible as well. And so then moving on to the dining room, this is kind of the heart of the space, one of the biggest used areas of the space as well. So we've started to lay out the tables. We also have noticed that, you know, we need to have a mobile beverage station. We need to have workstations, but how can we provide those to be, you know, flexible for the space? And so we've decided to coordinate with Diane and her team. We think we can do, you know, flush mounted outlets, flush mounted data ports, so that these mobile stations can actually move and the space can be more flexible. So nothing is built in, nothing is set in stone. As the center goes through time and as, you know, programs change or the center changes, these things can move along with that as well. Then moving down into the kitchen plan, we've been working with the kitchen consultant and Diane's team to kind of massage this space. So up here on the northern end of the kitchen, this is where the day-to-day meals that are happening in the dining room would be prepared. We've included a little office for, you know, menu planning, and then of course the toilet that is needed per code. There is a small space to do laundry. And then here on the south side, this is where the grab and go meals would be assembled. So we also have a fridge, a freezer, and then a dry storage. And then mobile meals would be taken out through this south door. And this also coincides with, you know, the staff parking and a turnaround. So any senior or any person that's coming to pick up a grab and go meal, they can just take that back drive that we showed. And it's a one-way loop all the way around. No 3-point turns, no tricky things like that. Another thing that we've looked at is making sure that we're providing enough for the maintenance and storage space, and then also providing a door from the maintenance and storage through to the mechanical so that someone that needs to reach the mechanical space doesn't have to walk all the way outside to do so, or if there was you know, someone coming and picking up crutches or a wheelchair from the storage, that can be done right through this line of traffic here. We've also been working to right size the maintenance and storage room to make sure that all of the tables and chairs that are in the dining room can fold up and fit within that space as well. Oh, 1 second. Oh. The presentation is having a mind of its own real quick. 1 second.
I think we're on page 36, Lena.
Yeah. I'm just going to do this really quick. Okay.
Great.
Sorry about that. Okay. So then also looking at the dining room, you know, we talked before about how we can make this space timeless, how we can make it as flexible as possible. And so we started to look at other uses. And so what we have here as the largest image is obviously the typical lunch layout. This is what will be used for most of the days. And we're looking at 6 top tables, and we think we can fit 84 people pretty comfortably. And you can see here, there's even some space to expand if those numbers needed to increase. But we've looked at other layouts as well, like what if there was a town hall meeting? In this arrangement, we could have 88 people. Could you guys host a lecture series? Maybe in this arrangement, there's 146 people. And then maybe, you know, in talking about how this center could accommodate new programs, could there maybe be a senior dance? This also has 84 people, but now the tables have been moved to the side a little bit and there could be a dance floor. So just looking at how to make the dining room space as flexible as possible, allowing for new programs. What we also wanted to include was a little bit more detailed renderings, especially of this main center dining space. And so you can see here what we're really envisioning for this. You can see the heavy timber kind of going throughout the space. You can see that acoustical dowel laminated timber that we were talking about for the ceiling, the skylights that we were talking about. And then you can see as you're sitting in the space, you feel like you're always surrounded by nature because we have these different points of glazing at the knuckles. And so from this view, you're looking out onto the terrace seating. From the other side, which we'll see in a second, you're looking out into the lawn. And so you can always kind of pick which experience you want to have. Also, what we've started to look at is the lighting layouts. We want to make sure that there's enough light provided in this space so that seniors can see, but we also want to make sure that we're not providing any hot spots or any areas of glare where a senior might feel like they're directly underneath the sun or underneath lighting. So for our lighting layout, what we're looking at is linear lighting that would actually be recessed within those flutes that we talked about in the ADLT. And then also supplementing that with pendant lighting that we think kind of emulates maybe fireflies on a summer night. We've also been working with the sustainability consultant on these skylights. There was concern that maybe these might show hotspots or areas of glare. And what we're actually looking to do here is provide a PV glass. So this is an inner layer within the glass that actually collects energy. So it helps with the net zero portion of the building, but it also doubles up as a learning tool. So you can imagine being in the space and pointing up to the skylights and saying, look, that's something that's actively collecting energy for our net zero goals. Which we think is a really cool part. And so here we've actually used that glass on a project in Orlando. And this was actually the entire roof structure was made of this. And you can see here how it actually diffuses the light really nicely, creates a little bit of a pattern, but it actually keeps it from being hot spots and areas of glare. So we just wanted to show that precedent as well. And so this is if you kind of spin around and look at the other side of the dining. Here you're looking out onto the lawn. You can see kind of the woods beyond. And you can see here, we're looking at that wood paneling, kind of wrapping all of the walls of the dining, bringing that nature inwards. And so there's also been talks, how can we add artwork to the center? And so we think on some of these long expanses of these wood paneled walls, this is where we could add some of those picture rails that showcase senior art or maybe local artists' art. And then we also wanted to include an image of the exterior of the building. We are showing our recommended material, which is the stainless steel shingles. But again, this is showing gold tones. But as we move on to the next steps, we can start talking about what are the tones that the town feels most comfortable with. Is it bronzes? Is it golds, champagnes? Do we want it to be more matte, more shiny? We think kind of a mix of a couple different tones would really help with this. But that's something we can narrow down and get samples of as we move on to the next phase. You can also see here at the bottom where we're alluding to having the meadow. We really are reducing the amount of maintained lawn that's needed. And so we're doing the light touch on the site with the native forbs and grasses. And so we just also wanted to include a little bit more additional info. Each time we've talked to you guys, we've shown a timeline, and most of the time we were up here on this upper timeline, the community workshops, the concept design, the schematic design, and now we're kind of ending design development here in October 2023. And so this top line shows where we've been, all of the meetings that we've had, whether public or private events, to get to, where we are and the images that we're showing today. And then the bottom bar shows kind of where we still have left to go. We're thinking about the construction documentation, really working on early site clearing and permitting so that we can get into that window of the northern long-eared bat. We want to make sure the site is cleared so that we're on schedule to start construction. Then we have a little bit of time for bids, and then we're still thinking construction would be about 18 months, finishing about end of year of 2025. And then last but not least, you guys are used to seeing us, R2, but we wanted to give out like a little shout out to the rest of the project team. So, we also have landscaped architect on board, civil engineer, mechanical, electrical, plumbing and fireproof engineer, structural, kitchen, sustainability, and an acoustical consultant. So this is the whole team that helps us put together these presentations. And that's the conclusion of our design development presentation. Are there any slides or any questions that you guys have?
Board members have any questions or comments at this point?
So I just have one. Well, I have several comments. I really appreciate everything, the feeling, the soaring feeling that you walk into, the lightness that is there, coupled with the warmth of the wood. And I appreciate all the sustainability that you have looked at as you've gone through this process. The vestibule, which is on page, I don't know where it is. It still seems a little boxy to me. I think we talked about it at the last meeting. And it is...
I think 25 is the page I'm looking at here with the zoomed in.
Okay, so the vestibule, but it still has and on page 27, you can see that it's a very flat roof in that vestibule.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if you can take advantage of some angles, pitch that roof that is in that vestibule and make it more compatible. It seems like you're walking into a box, and it takes away, I think, from some of the grandeur that you've actually have as, an architectural focus for this building.
We can look at that. That's a really interesting comment. Actually, we're kind of going the other way with it. Right now, we're looking at even maybe making the roof of the vestibule glass, so that what I'm trying to do is make the glass, the wall almost disappear. Right now, we're also looking at what type of doors we'll have. We'll have assist because it's a senior building. But I want you to pass into the building almost without realizing that there's a vestibule. So that's what the design intent is. But we will look at that further.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
No, I mean, it's just incredible how this is, coming to be, right? We've been through this back in April. We saw the schematic design. We've probably had a dozen or more meetings with the team since then over the last 6 months to get where we are today. And I was just hoping, Lena or Carol, if you could just explain what the next steps are. So we've reviewed the presentation. Obviously, we'll give the board a little bit of time to absorb it all, go back and take a closer look at it. But what would be the next steps? Let's just say if, maybe we have some minor tweaks or not. What will you go to do next?
Okay. The two.
Can we take the PowerPoint down so we can see folks? Awesome. Thank you.
We're going to do two really important steps right away. These drawings that we're showing you today are based on a more detailed set of drawings, like the blueprints that you expect from architects. And we will be reviewing those plans page by page with the town, the members of the town staff, and a page turn. While we've been doing this work, that, by the way, that includes more detailed engineering drawings. We'll be talking about maintenance, we'll be talking about longevity, but we'll actually be doing a page-by-page first with the members of your staff. The other thing that we've been working on is we have to confirm costs to the best of our ability right now. Since we're not building the building, see what will be the opinion of cost, but it will be detailed, and we'll review that with you, and we'll also review any alternates to the materials that we've proposed that either add cost to the building or bring it down. So those are the two next steps.
But sort of like the long view forward is right now, we'll make the changes that come out of those two activities. But right now we're at the point where we know what the major systems and materials of the building are, but it's not, don't have enough information on a detailed drawing to get an actual bid from contractors. Some people will build it. So we'll be completing those drawings. And we'll also be completing the specifications, the written description of materials and processes to complete the building. When that's done, we'll have reviews of that, both cost and again, page turns. When we're done with that, then we'll be looking for contractors to construct this. Things that we'll look at that you probably will be interested in later referred to material selections in more depth. We'll be doing that. Have I left out anything here? Help me, please.
So I know that we'll have sort of refining choices of the design, such as the color of the shingles and that sort of thing. So there's going to be some feedback back and forth in that regard. And I know structurally you all are, working on that part. And so interior finishes, I mean, it's kind of funny when you look at building projects, how things change. And I know when I was redoing my house, I was running Cat 6 wire everywhere thinking, okay, I want to be able to have data ports in all the rooms, whatever. And now it's all Wi-Fi. So it's all unnecessary. But I guess the only thing that I just wanted to also talk about is maybe how you're going to address connectivity within the building. I suppose it probably will be fiber optic to the building and Wi-Fi interior at this point. I think that's probably state of the art, but those sort of choices and decisions all have to be made as we move forward.
And we've had some of those discussions already. We've had meetings with Eddie Schnell and Heath Liebman in IT to go over, and where we want screens and where we, how to, the security, the rabbit holes we went down in those discussions, were above my pay grade for sure.
Well, I just want to make an additional comment that thank you for going down all those rabbit holes. and there'll be more to go down, I'm sure. I just want to express that I'm very grateful for the work that's been done so far, Kathy, as liaison and heading up this project. This is really shaping up in a fantastic way. I'm extremely excited about the developments and how it's progressed. At this point, we're really talking timeline and cost. I think those are like the really big questions that are still out there. And, we'll work to the point where we get those costs identified and have a better idea on the timeline. I think it's important for us to at least start doing the site work as soon as possible to fit within that long-eared bat window. That's the only window we have to do clearing, so we should be prepared to go with that clearing.
Well, we'll be doing clearing actually in 2 stages. We'll be doing the initial clearing and then we'll be coming back to do clearing again. You want to just talk about that, how that's going to work?
The drawings are being prepared now for the initial clearing. It won't be taking out root balls. It'll just be cutting trees down and getting so that we can get access to the site. That all has to be completed by the end of January or the end of February. So we're planning to go for permits and do the actual work in January.
Yeah, so right now we've got Matt Jedlick of McLean is preparing a long form environmental assessment for us, and we should have a draft of that later this month. And then we've already done the traffic study that'll be incorporated into it. We're looking to go back to the planning board once we have the EAF and the possible environmental impacts reviewed. And then we'll be going to the ARB as well. As you know, we're going to both the planning board and the ARB for comment. We're currently have an application, a lot line modification application with the Suffolk County, because while we, we created the parcel and we had a formal, Suffolk County is requiring a formal lot line modification. So we're in the process of doing that too. So that's all happening. Planning is, working on that. With the town attorney's office. And so we'll be hopefully back next month with, more discussion and about the plan. But I just wanted to say that it's just been such a delight to work with this team. It's been a tremendous collaboration, and the board has also, on different meetings, we've had board members come in so that we can all, be a part of it. And, everybody, comes from these things with a different perspective because they have different life experiences. And we'll have David to thank for all the art that's hanging in the space. It was his idea to build that into the walls so we could hang art throughout. And so it's just, and it's coming to life here, and we really appreciate, the team and the folks at Human Services that are also working behind the scenes to make this happen. And I guess the next big piece is Diane's coordinating a meeting with for the kitchen, because we have a net zero goal, but the challenge is we have a commercial kitchen, and that pulls a lot of juice. So we're going over the plans and making sure we're getting the proper equipment in the building, and that we've got the space laid out just right to be able to do our nutrition program where our seniors come every day to the dining room, but also be able to accommodate the grab and go when they come once a week to pick that up as well, because that needs a different space within the kitchen.
I think you really captured the engagement from the community, which I was part of, and was in the rooms when people came, and the function, the form meets the function so well, and for all of those elements, and specifically for, we talked about connectivity for technology, but there's a lot of connectivity here for people, to be able to not ever be isolated or too far away from something. It feels very connected, even though they're separate wings. So I think you did a really good job on that. Still not sold on the metal shingles, but I'm open.
They've worn me down on the metal shingles.
I'm looking forward to metal shingles, and I'm also looking forward to personally taking advantage of the senior center late 2025, early 26. That's so I'll be monitoring that, and
Sure.
let's keep it going. I'm really excited about the project, and thank you all, everyone, for all of your hard work. And it really is shaping up to be something we can all be proud of, I think.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we can now move on to our next topic, which is the Suffolk County Water Authority update on water usage and water issues. Jason, if you can bring our friends from the Suffolk County Water Authority onto the call.
I will admit them right now.
We're going to do a remote Zoom presentation. As many of you know, that we've had water issues in terms of water supply during peak season, summertime mostly, as a result of irrigation systems all coming on in the early morning hours, which in some areas has caused low pressure within the systems, which raises concerns about fire safety. And we have with us a couple of folks from the Suffolk County Water Authority, Daniel DuBois. I hope I say that. Is it DuBois?
DuBois, close enough.
DuBois, okay. And Ty Fuller. Well, morning. I heard a presentation of yours some years ago at the Spring CAC, I believe.
Yes.
Or Ashwell Hall. Really helpful in understanding how our aquifer is set up and how it works. And welcome today. You're going to give us a brief update on water usage and water issues that the Water Authority is dealing with. So.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much to you, Supervisor, and to the town board for inviting us. I'm going to share my screen here. Just a moment. Hopefully this all works. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yeah, can you go to presentation mode?
Yeah, I'm starting that up right now.
Thank you. And perfect.
Great. So I'm going to kick it off to Ty, and he's going to run through this, and we'll be happy to answer your questions at the end. Ty?
Yes, thanks, Dan. And again, good morning to everybody. So we wanted to give a brief update to you all on just some of the different things we've been dealing with in the East Hampton area, as well as give an update on our conservation efforts. Dan, you'll be running the slides, so I'll just tell you to advance. You can jump forward. So just a brief background on SCWA. I'm sure you're all familiar. Again, we're an independent public benefit corporation operating under the Public Authorities Law of New York. We're not a private company. We serve roughly 1.2 million people within Suffolk County, and we are one of the largest groundwater suppliers in the nation. Next slide, Dan. And just to clear up some confusion for people, we're not a branch of Suffolk County government. Sometimes when people hear Suffolk County, they do think that about us. And very important, we do not create or enforce drinking water regulations. That's solely the responsibility of the EPA and secondarily the Department of Health. We abide by the regulations set forth by those agencies. Next slide. And just about our system, we are solely reliant on the aquifers as the drinking water source within Long Island. That is the only source of drinking water that we get our water from. It is composed of three principal aquifers, the Upper Glacial, Magathie, and Lloyd. In the East Hampton area, typically we get our water from Upper Glacial or Magathie aquifers. And collectively, we have approximately 65 trillion gallons of water within our aquifer system. That's a bit of a misnomer. Roughly 5 to 10% of that water is extractable. So I would say what's available to us is about 6.5 trillion gallons, roughly. And we have a network of approximately 600 wells located at 240 locations throughout Suffolk County. In East Hampton specifically, we have roughly 25 wells that serve this region. Next slide. Okay. So just a little background on our water quality collection efforts. We have one of the largest laboratories that sample for groundwater in the country. Within our laboratory that's located in Hauppauge, we roughly sample in a given year over 91,000 samples. And what's really important is that we sample more than what's required by regulators. EPA, they require roughly, we sample for about 414 compounds, which is 265 more than the EPA requires for water suppliers. So that's really important that we are testing and sampling and looking for things well beyond what's required by our regulators. Next slide, Dan. And in terms of our detection capabilities, that has grown throughout time. Initially, when the regulations were set forth in the 80s, we would sample up to parts per million. At this point, we've gone down to parts per billion, whether it's looking for some emerging compounds or even parts per trillion with these new compounds, such as the fluorinated compounds that I'll refer to later on. We're detecting down to parts per trillion, and we'll just keep sampling further and further down. Next slide, now. And it's important to note that, in terms of our sampling, we not only sample the raw, untreated groundwater at the wellhead, we sample every point throughout the well field, whether that's at the treatment stations that are located at our well field, and also the distribution networks that we have. So we have roughly 6,000 miles of water main. Throughout that network, when we're supplying our treated drinking water, we have sample stations. And that picture here shows someone collecting a sample from our sample station that our lab would analyze. So we're constantly analyzing to make sure that, we're meeting and exceeding all federal and local regulations. Next slide, Dan. And, for our customers, they can go to our website, scwa.com, to get a copy of the drinking water report. That's updated annually. That is a federal requirement. So we do have that information available online. And more importantly, when people want to get a further understanding of what those compounds are and whether, there's any concern, they can call the number listed here, 631-218-1138, and we're more than happy to answer any questions. Next slide, Dan. So PFAS, PFOA, the fluorinated compounds, this has been a big topic over the past several years, specifically in the East Hampton region. This is a family of roughly 9,000 compounds. We're only talking about 2 here, and that's been getting a lot of attention. The reason being is that these are known as forever chemicals. They do accumulate within the human body. It's been found throughout the entire world, even in the blood of polar bears in the Arctic. They've found this. There's not one place in this entire world that has not been impacted by these compounds. So rightfully so, there's been a lot of attention given to it. Next slide, Dan. So we began our testing in 2013, and that actually coincided with the third unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. So in 1996, just to give a little background, the Safe Drinking Water Act required that once every 5 years, the EPA issues a new list of roughly 30 compounds, to be monitored by public water systems. During that third monitoring rule that occurred in around 2013, we began sampling for PFAS and PFOA. Now, around this time, there was a lot of attention that was occurring. If you recall, even at a state level, Hoosick Falls, that came to attention around 2016. Looking back in 2017, East Hampton Airport, they determined that firefighting foam did impact that region, and a portion of the airfield was designated a Superfund site. And then more recently, the Department of Health, New York State Department of Health, they set standards for PFAS and PFOA at 10 parts per trillion. Although, there is definitely a lot of concern for it, fortunately, we do have readily available treatment methods to deal with these compounds. Granular activated carbon is very effective at removing these compounds. So where there is concern, we do have granular activated compound removal systems in place. But what's really important is that the majority of our wells don't require filtration. 2/3 do not require any filtration at all. They meet and exceed all standards. And also when it comes back to PFAS and PFOA and any other fluorinated compounds, the EPA recently, they have proposed new drinking water standards that's still ongoing that are lower than what New York State has their regulations at, and that's at 4 parts per trillion. And the reality is that if those are set forth, that would probably require more treatment systems to meet this new standard. Next slide, Dan. And the conservation initiatives are very important of what we do. And before I jump away from the fluorinated compounds, the other thing I wanted to say is, I definitely wanted to acknowledge, the efforts that have been put forth by the East Hampton board. Supervisor Van Scoyoc, you were instrumental in what we've done in East Hampton, specifically in Wainscott. Several years ago in 2017, like I brought up, when we detected PFAS at the Wainscott region, private wells that were determined to have levels above the drinking water advisory at that time that was set forth by the EPA, we worked together to connect homes there. We even managed to get funding in terms of grants that were able to save over $10 million to the residents of East Hampton through those efforts. So, I just commend you, I commend the board, and I just commend the joint efforts of us working together to connect those people to public water to ensure that they're safe. So water conservation, that's another thing that is really important on the East End. That's something that, we've stressed ongoing. I would say that, in terms of emerging contaminants being one of the bigger issues we deal with, water quantity and conserving our water for future generations is equally important. Next slide, Dan. So some of the issues that we face, our water usage typically occurs during the summer. Roughly between May to October, I'd say 70% of our water usage, occurs in terms of, overall usage. And that primarily occurs through irrigation and other sources. Now, as I pointed out, we have a large supply of groundwater. Even still, having this large amount doesn't mean that water can be pumped freely from our aquifers without impact. Water is always moving through our aquifers from the center of Long Island towards the shorelines. And under natural conditions, water can be in balance. But, any change, through overpumpage or anything else can have an effect on the quality and quantity of our groundwater supply. So, this greater usage leads to more energy costs. That requires more infrastructure in terms of wells. Unfortunately, those higher costs in terms of more wells, more infrastructure get passed on to our customers in terms of higher rates. And that's something that, we definitely want to tackle. Next slide, Dan. So I pointed out that irrigation is probably one of the greatest contributors to high water usage on Long Island. I mean, again, we're in the suburbs. Having green lawns is important for a lot of people, but unfortunately, it does require a lot of water. Secondarily, this is something that we've seen on the East End. Open loop geothermal systems have been a recent contributor to high water usage. And before I discuss the geothermal systems, I just want to be clear. Suffolk Water, we don't have a problem with conventional geothermal systems as they were originally constructed. There is just exceptions where people do use public water to serve these systems, and that's something that we do have a concern with. Next slide, Dan. So, typically we pump during our peak times in the summer over 550,000 gallons of water every minute. Now, our peak demand period during the summertime usually occurs sometime between 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. And this graph is kind of showing you the daily pumpage demand that occurs around 6 a.m. This is what you would probably see in the summertime. And, during this time, we're pumping enough water to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool every minute and 20 seconds. It's an incredible amount of water. This is usually a time where all of our wells are in operation. Our tank levels are dropping. People usually during this time may experience low water pressure. And that low water pressure is a concern because, beyond just the infrastructure costs and everything else to keep up with this demand, our bigger concern is fire flow protection. There's always a fear that, if there was a major fire that broke out during this time, would we have the available pressure to meet that demand? So that's why conservation is definitely key for what we're doing. And it was definitely put to the test this summer. Next slide, Dan.
Sorry.
No problem. And just to kind of go further on that point, what we're showing here in this graph is what we call the irrigation situation. So we're showing a lot of things right here. What I would focus your attention to is the blue chart down below, right where that arrow is at, where it shows 25,000 gallons a minute. That is wintertime water usage. This is actually showing over the course of a given day. That's around 5 a.m. So typically in the wintertime, there's no water usage or very little. People are sleeping around that time. People will wake up around 7, 8 o'clock. They'll get ready to go to work. They're using some water. And then you'll have consistent water usage throughout the day and it drops off at night. Very simple, very manageable. Compare that to the summertime usage, what you see in the orange and red. At that same time period, around 5 to 6 a.m., you're seeing almost a 20-fold increase in water usage. I mean, it's astronomical. And the reason being is that most people have automatic sprinkler systems that are set to go off sometime between 3 to 6 a.m. Even during rainy periods, we see that same demand. That's because people have these automated sprinkler systems that still run. And that is what we have the majority of our wells in. Roughly 2/3 of our wells are solely in place to meet summertime irrigation demand. So that means that out of our network of 600 wells during wintertime, we probably can use maybe 200. So that definitely is a problem, and it is an irrigation situation that we want to tackle. Next slide, Dan. Now, with geothermal systems, what I'm showing here is just two different types of geothermal systems. And for those that don't know, geothermal systems, they are a technology that uses the naturally cooling groundwater temperatures to provide heating and or cooling. So on Long Island, groundwater temperature is roughly 55 degrees, give or take. And these systems are able to extract that water, usually through a well or some system, and exchange the heat differential between the outside temperature and the temperature of the groundwater. And from that, you can get cooling, or conversely, in the wintertime when it's colder, you can actually extract heat out of it. So with the closed loop geothermal system, what you're doing is you're just recirculating water, that's going to provide that heating and or cooling. We have no issues with those. Open loop systems, the conventional types, they'll have usually two types of wells that are constructed in place for it. They'll have what's known as a supply well that will, pump the water. It goes through a system where there's a heat exchanger. then it goes into a diffusion well where the water is dumped out. And again, if you just have your own private well and you're using that for, the geothermal system, there's no net change in the water availability on either side. And we don't have a problem with that. What we do have a problem is those systems that are using public water. Next slide, Dan. So there are areas, particularly on the East End, where people cannot use supply wells conventionally. Maybe they're too close to the coast, and now there's a risk of using water that might be seawater. So somewhere along the line, somebody came up with the bright idea to use public water. They figure that it's a lower cost and they can use that to run their systems. And, that's creating extreme demand because some of these larger homes, let's say if you're, 10,000 square feet roughly, they might be using, 50 gallons a minute or more to run these systems. And, we're in an area where, let's say 3 or 4 of these geothermal systems using public water will be the equivalent of a public supply well. And that places that increased demand. More importantly, these systems are in constant usage. They're not like sprinkler systems that may operate between 3 to 6 a.m. To provide that constant heating and cooling, these systems are constantly using water throughout the day. And that creates a new baseline for us. So now we have to deal with that baseline of, these homes that are using public water for geothermal. Then on top of that, you're putting in sprinkler systems, and that creates just incredibly high demand that we do have trouble keeping up with at times over the summer. Next slide, Dan. And what I'm showing here is just a graphic showing some of the top consumers on the East End, and you can see it can vary. I mean, all of these customers are starting somewhere around 750,000 gallons in terms of usage, but some of our larger users, they're using upwards of 20 million gallons. Now, that's a key point here because that's exceeding the water usage of hospitals. There were stories that were written in Newsday several years ago. One of those top users, they did point out that they were using a geothermal system that was using public water. So that's when that was initially brought to our attention, and we definitely have concerns with that, and that's something that we're hoping that the towns can help us with, because again, it is a system that is considered environmentally friendly when it's used conventionally, the way it's supposed to be, using their own private wells. But when you're using public water for this type of usage, it is a problem. Next slide, Dan. So what are the problems with overpumpage? We live on an island. We're surrounded by water. To the south, you have the Atlantic Ocean, you have the bays. Fresh water exists on top of seawater. That's how it works on the island. There's differences in density. So fresh water is able to float on top, sort of like an oil-water relationship. But the risk is that when you do overpump wells, due to increased demand, you can potentially contaminate that freshwater supply with seawater. And that can occur through 2 ways. One way is through saltwater upconing, where the seawater starts to come in from the bottom. That is somewhat manageable. We may experience that at times where we see the salinity levels increase in our wells. But then the other concern is lateral intrusion. That overpumpage can result in the seawater coming in laterally, contaminating our freshwater supplies. And that's a huge concern because, that is considered somewhat irreversible. So we're constantly monitoring for that. And that's why, the conservation initiatives, we put forth are important, because we're trying to minimize the amount of time we operate these wells to prevent these type of catastrophic scenarios. So we've been pretty good at doing this so far, but we need continued effort of our residents to, adhere to some of these conservation initiatives that we do put forth. Next slide, Dan.
So I will take over from here, and I'll talk about what we're doing at the Water Authority to address the issues that Ty's identified. So primarily, the first thing I'll talk about is in 2020, we instituted a tiered rate system for our customers. So that essentially means that when customers go over certain thresholds every billing cycle, they use a certain amount of water. For your standard household, it's about 89,000 gallons of water in a quarter. They'll go up to a higher cost per gallon used, what we call our conservation rate. And that covers about the top 20% of our customers. So, the bottom 80% of our customers in terms of usage are not affected by this. The top 20%, they go into this higher rate. And it's a system where, once you go into that higher rate, it's every gallon you use beyond. So we think it's been an effective way to encourage our customers to reduce their water usage, try to stay out of that conservation rate, but also help recoup some of the costs. As Ty mentioned, all that additional water usage requires additional infrastructure. So we think that the customers who are using the most water should help pay for that. One thing that we're considering right now, as I mentioned, that rate covers about approximately top 20% of our users, is looking at a third tier for super users. Again, some of the ones that Ty identified on that map that are using 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, up to 20 million gallons of water per year. And this additional tier for super users would probably cover, again, we're considering it right now, so it's not set in stone, but about the top 1% of users, to again encourage them to use less water, but also recoup some of those funds to help pay for the infrastructure necessary to meet the demand that they're putting on the system. In terms of geothermal, also in 2020, we instituted a ban on the use of open loop geothermal systems for using public water. There are two major caveats to that I will mention. Number one is that systems that already existed were kind of grandfathered in under this policy. So there are some major users that still exist on our system that we are aware of. And the other issue that we have with this ban is our ability to enforce it is pretty limited. We're not a regulator. We don't have permitting powers. We don't do regular inspections of our customers. And we know that sometimes people, as Ty mentioned, if you have a situation where originally you would drilled a private well to supply your open loop system, but the well fails, or you're getting salt water into your system and you can no longer use it. A lot of times we know that customers will, rather than drilling a new expensive well, they'll just hook up to our system, and our ability to stop that is pretty limited. With that said, we're doing more now to make the rules known to new customers, ensuring that they are fully aware of what the rules are. And we're doing everything we can to make sure people are aware of the problems with open loop geothermal systems and using public water. And then on the topic of conservation, this year it's been a big year for us at the Water Authority on conservation. In January, we adopted a new comprehensive water conservation plan. It's a multi-phase plan, multi-year approach to encouraging water conservation with our customers. Three key elements that I just want to highlight for you all here is the adoption of an odd even lawn watering policy. I'll get into that a little bit more in just a second here. We've enhanced the rebates that we offer to our customers. So we've offered for a number of years rebates for installing water-saving devices like smart irrigation controllers, low-flow shower heads, aerators, those sort of things that can help reduce your water usage. With this year, we drastically increased the amount of money that we offer in credits to our customers. Previously, it was about $50 for the entire lifetime of your account. It was pretty limited in what you could get back through these credits. We've now upped that. You can now get up to $250 and every 3 years. So you can install multiple water-saving devices to increase your water conservation. We've also put in some new credits that are available, pressure regulators, which help reduce the amount of water that your sprinkler systems use, rain barrels, which you can collect rainwater to help supplement your landscaping irrigation, solar pool covers, which help reduce the amount of evaporation in your pool, so you have to fill it less often. And our customers are responding very strongly to this enhanced program. Just this year, we've had 1,700 new credits go out the door. That's far and away the most successful this year that this program's ever had. So we know that people are responding. They want to take advantage of this, and we think that's great. So we definitely encourage everyone to do that. And the last thing I'll mention is a proactive ad campaign. So in years past, the Water Authority, we've always been, pretty active in getting our water conservation message out through our bill messages, through emails to our customers. But we know that our customers, we're not reaching all of them, and everyone's attention is pulled in many different ways. So we're trying to reach people where they are. So for the first time ever, we have a proactive conservation ad campaign. We have a budget behind this. We're using digital ads. We're using newspaper ads, radio ads, going out social media to reach customers where they are, let them know about the odd even watering policy, the new rebates, the importance of water conservation, and we really think this is working. So it's been, it's only been a year. It's been one summer. We know this is going to be a multi-year effort to change behavior on Long Island, but we're going to keep at it, and we think that we're starting to see some response with how things went this year with the summer. I'd encourage all of our customers and our the board members here to go to our website, go to scwa.com/conservation for all the information that's available. You can get your credits, fill out the application and get your credit there. You can sign up for an in-home consultation. One of our employees will go out to your home or meet with you virtually, and they will do an in-house consultation. They'll talk about your water use, what you're using your water on. They'll look for leaks and things like that, figure out ways that you can reduce your water use. We found this is a very effective program for getting people to reduce their water usage. So go to scwa.com/conservation, check out all the information there. And the last thing that I want to bring up is what the towns and villages across Suffolk County can do to help in our effort. So I mentioned before the odd even lawn watering policy. So essentially what that is, it is rules that we've established for our customers on when they can water their lawns, their gardens, common areas, based on the calendar date and the address of their home. So if you live at a home with an even numbered house number, you should only water on even number calendar days, and vice versa, odd number home on odd number calendar days. We know that most of our customers, they don't water every day. Some certainly do water every single day, and for them, following this policy will definitely reduce their water use. But what we do see is that a lot of our customers water on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That graph that Tide showed earlier, where goes up at 6 a.m., down, and then up again at 6 a.m. We know on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's even more pronounced because people follow the same schedule. If we can shift that around and we can have people watering on different days, following the schedule, that will help drastically with the logjam. It's like having too many cars on the highway. If we can get people to commute at different times, it's going to help the system drastically. And then also, if we can, if there are some people who are watering every day and we can cut their water usage, that's going to be really beneficial to the environment and preserving the aquifer. So what you can do to help as a municipality is, and we've asked this for every town and village across Suffolk County, adopt a local ordinance that codifies the odd even watering policy into law and enforce that. Much like I mentioned with the geothermal issue, again, we can't enforce this. It's something that we are stressing to our customers, the importance of it, trying to encourage them to do this, giving them helpful tips on what they can do to make it easy to follow. But at the end of the day, it is voluntary. So we need towns and villages to help enforce this policy. So what we ask of you and across the East End and Suffolk County, codify this policy, enforce it with your code enforcement or whichever mechanism the board would feel is appropriate for this, and make it part of your messaging to your residents. It is very, it's so important that we do this for all the reasons that Ty mentioned. One other last part of that I'll mention, it's part of our policy as well, is prohibiting watering on any days between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., especially during the summer when evaporation, the heat, sun, it's very wasteful. It really, most of that water does not get into the ground, doesn't really help your plants. It's just going to evaporate very quickly. So people should be watering in the evenings, in the early morning, but they should be following the odd even policy. And that's the best thing that we can do to ensure that we've got water availability and we preserve the aquifer for future generations. So that is the end of our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
So Ty and Daniel, thank you so much for the presentation. This is such an important topic, and there's nothing more important than the quality of our water here. We all rely on it. And to remind folks that we live on a single source aquifer, and that what we do on the land and how we treat this aquifer determines really our viability here in so many ways. So I appreciate all your efforts. Suffolk County Water Authority has been a great partner. Ty, you brought me back to 2017 when I'd just been elected, and we found out there was a water crisis in Wayne-Scott. I was expecting a trial by fire as supervisor, not a trial by water, but we got through that, and you all were so helpful in creating a water district that contained over, I think, 520 different residences. And but that story will continue. How we treat our water and how we respond to that resource is so important. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
I just can't understand the lowering our drinking water, our available drinking water, to simply water grass that actually does no benefit whatsoever to anything else. it's an invasive artificial, type of landscape. And I remember growing up on Long Island when, people moved out from the city and were sold this idea of this Kentucky blue lawn, Kentucky blue lawn grass that everybody should have because that makes you a good steward of your neighborhood, and how wrong that all was. So I would encourage everyone and the town to do whatever we can to curtail this use of water for no purpose, especially our drinking water. I mean, it makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I appreciate that comment, Councilwoman. I didn't mention this in the presentation, but one of the interesting things that we learned recently, we did a customer survey earlier this year, and one of the questions we asked for the first time is how many of our customers have an automatic sprinkler system installed in their home. And I was kind of shocked to learn that more than half of our customers have one of these systems. So, I mean, to me, those always seem like a luxury, but now the majority of the respondents in that survey had one of those systems installed. We don't have the regional data on this, but I suspect on the East End and East Hampton, that's probably even a little bit higher than about I think it was like 52% of respondents said that. So the culture of lawn watering is, ingrained in Suffolk County and Long Island. That's why I said it's going to be a multi-year effort to kind of change behavior, but we're going to keep at it.
Yeah, and I attended a seminar 5 years ago by a local landscape, well-known landscape designer here that's for sustainable landscaping, Edwina Von Gall. I moved into a house that had the auto irrigation. I turned it off as soon as I came home from that, and I don't fertilize, don't do anything, and I have beautiful ground cover that's sustainable and lasts through droughts and is not so high maintenance.
Well, that has been one of the efforts that the town's undertaken, is to help residents understand there's another way of landscaping that doesn't require as much, or in many cases, any irrigation. Right here at Town Hall, we have a great example of a pollinator garden, a different way to garden and have landscaping with native plants that helps encourage and supports the ecosystems, native pollinators, et cetera. It's absolutely beautiful. We understand that in some cases you need some irrigation and regular watering to establish plants, but we should be making choices that only require the watering for the establishment of the plants. And then once established, you can skip the irrigation. It's hard to believe that, our public water source for drinking is being used at such high volumes for just heating single-family homes. That seems terribly wasteful. And I know that you all have looked at this tiering system of charging extra beyond what the normal needs of water are per household. And, that's something I'm sure going forward will also help the situation as you make those adjustments so that people find more efficient, less costly ways to do what they need to do, whether it be landscaping or heating and cooling, and protect that critical drinking water, which we all rely on.
Mm-hmm. If I could, so I want to applaud the Water Authority for your conservation campaign. And I just wanted to say the genesis of requesting this presentation came from an article that ran in the New York Times in late August. America is using up its groundwater like there's no tomorrow. Unchecked overuse is draining and damaging aquifers nationwide, threatening millions of people and America's status as a food superpower. And they had a map, and they showed that on the Times website that indicated that the wells on Long Island are declining. And I just wanted to know, because this came up last night, two of your colleagues were at the East Hampton Library, Tim Kilcommons and John Marafino, giving a presentation. And this question came up in the audience, and it's my question as well. I mean, how concerned should we be about the depletion of our drinking water?
Well, fortunately, we've been working with federal agencies like the United States Geological Survey about this. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is a sustainability project that's been underway for several years. So the USGS, in conjunction with the DEC, has been overseeing it. I'm actually involved with that as well. I've learned several things from this. One of the things is that, the USGS has been studying groundwater in this region or collecting information for over 100 years. And what they pointed out was that, throughout this course of, 100 plus years of collecting water levels, they've seen about roughly a 7-foot drop. So overall, it's not a lot. It does seem like a lot, but, if you're talking about regions of the island where, fresh water can go down 1,000+ feet, it's not significant. But what you see the effects are more represented in is the ecohydrological effects, meaning that the lakes, the streams, the wetlands, those are connected to groundwater. A lot of people, they don't associate that with groundwater, because they think upstate, it's coming from a mountain. No, when you're looking at a stream here, that's groundwater with the ground removed. So that's the bigger concern. You've seen that throughout the years during drought periods, that these lakes and streams start to dry up or the wetlands are impacted. And that's a huge concern. And that's also the reason why, we're pushing these conservation efforts, because again, it's like, people look at this number and say, oh, we got 65 to 120 trillion gallons of water in our aquifer. We get a lot of rain. We're not like California. I say no. Certain regions, particularly on the east end, you don't have as much available fresh water. So unlike Hauppauge, where let's say you go down 1,000 feet, there are parts of the east end where you can only go 100 feet and get fresh water, and that's it. So that's the concern. It depends on where you're at. But I will say though that we're monitoring constantly. As a matter of fact, the USGS, we've done some recent drilling and testing on several sites in East Hampton recently. So we are monitoring things. I'm confident that we'll have water available for future generations, but we do need to be mindful, and the time is now.
Great. Thank you, Ty.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Daniel, as well, for presenting today. And again, public awareness is so important, and we will continue to work with you to get the word out on that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That brings us up to our next presentation. We have Eleanor Whitmore Early Childhood Center, and we have Tim Frazier, Executive Director of that organization. And welcome, Tim.
Thank you so much. Peter, I have to agree with you as a senior citizen. That was an exciting presentation on the Senior Center. It's my pleasure to be here for Early Childhood Center discussion with you, Eleanor Whitmore.
The other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, both ends. Anyway, I'd like to thank the board for all their support of Eleanor Whitmore's Early Childhood Center, both financially and organizationally through the years, and also your personal commitment from several board members. It's greatly appreciated. Today, I want to talk a little bit about a center, and then mostly talk about our focus on partnerships and possibilities for the community, as well as what we do for young children also. Next slide. I'm just going to briefly give you a background and then why it matters, our financial situation and our current situation with you, and also partnerships in our program, and finally our relationship with the school district. So next slide, background. Again, our center was founded, not where it is right now, but it was founded as a Head Start in 1969. So over 50 years we've been in this community, formerly known as the East Hampton Daycare. In 2013, the name was changed to Eleanor Whitmore in honor of Eleanor's push for early childhood education in this community. I'm sure a lot of you knew Eleanor. She's still around. She's still supportive of us, and she's a lovely lady. In 1995 to 2018, our pre-K provided pre-K for John Marshall Elementary for the East Hampton School District, and we were the first in the country to provide full day pre-K in the county, excuse me. Not in the country, but in the county. Today, pre-K is provided by local school districts through the Universal Pre-K funds, but EWECC has shifted focus to younger children. Right now, we service children from 18 months until 4-year-olds. Next slide. We are licensed by the New York State Office of Child and Family Services, OCFS. I have to say that that is quite an accomplishment. It's an ongoing fulfilling their mandates for certification as being licensed as a full-time child care center. We are affiliated with the National Association for the Education of Young Children. All lead teachers are early childhood certified educators. They don't necessarily have to have a degree, but they are certified through OCFS. Each class has a bilingual teacher or teacher assistant. This is something we really strive to do, is provide a bilingual atmosphere in the center. We're open 5 days a week per year-round, 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. I will preface that, but we do close the center for 6 weeks during the year, during school calendars and also for holidays. But that gives our staff an opportunity to take their time off because we need them there every day that our children are there. There is a child care crisis today. EWECC exists in a child care desert. The state has designated this area as a child care desert. There's very few opportunities for parents and families to have high-quality child care in this area. Costs for running a licensed child care and high-quality early learning center are very high. Regulations and licensing guidelines are from both OCFS and NAEYC are labor and dollar intensive, and Relief Act funds have dried up. Especially after COVID, they came back really strong, but we're seeing that now it's more and more difficult to get those kinds of funds. And general families are struggling to afford child care fees. Without adequate child care, we cannot have a productive workforce. Our local economy depends on strong, reliable workers for healthcare, teachers, building trades, landscaping, and service industries. Lack of child care affects the entire family. Loss of two-parent income primarily takes women out of the workforce and can derail or set back careers, and child may suffer from lack of decreased social emotional development. EWECC is the only affordable, all-day, high-quality licensed childcare and early learning center on the east end of Long Island. 58% of our families that we serve reside in low and extremely low-income households. So early education matters, as we all know. 85%, more than 85% of the human brain is formed by age 5. So that's why this is critical to have something available for young children, not only within their families, but also a place to go to have an experience, because these first 5 years do matter the most. Accelerated growth in social, emotional, linguistic, and physical development are something that we are assessing all the time in our center. All children can benefit from early childhood education. Today demands kindergarten-ready students going to our public schools or private schools. That's what we're focused on. Investing in the future. Every dollar invested in high-quality early childhood education returns more than 7 times its value in benefits and societal benefits. Early intervention saves time and money on special ed services. It creates habits and traits that make more successful learners, and it's connected to high school retention rates. Just to share with you some of our financial situation, our annual budget is $2.2 million. 86% is direct program expenses, 14% administrative and operating expenses. That's well in the range for nonprofits of being a successful nonprofit organization. The fees, 62% of our budget are amongst the lowest in Suffolk County. Our fundraising and government grants make up the remainder. Our center this year, 23-24, we are addressing the shifting demands of our community. Right now, we have 4 classrooms dedicated to toddlers, 18 months to 35 months old. 3 years ago, we had only 2. Fewer children and more staff required per classroom. In a toddler classroom, we can only have as many as 12 students, 12 children, and with that, we have to have as many as 2 staff members for that number of students. Wait list of 60 families for our toddler program as of today. Funds from East Hampton Town enable us to make these necessary, both costly shifts. Now we have 3 classrooms dedicated to 3-year-olds up to age 4. 1 preschool classroom, which we have considered discontinuing as need has diminished. We have right now 5 private pay children, and 4 are spilled over from Springs School District, where they had an overload of pre-K students that wanted to go to Springs. Just a graphic right now of yeah.
Is this the right one?
No, the next one. sorry, oh, I'm sorry, go back.
Great.
Just wanted to share with you some of our partnerships that we have right now at the center. We are partnering with the East Hampton Library with a program called Book Time, where students are exposed to books by volunteers coming in and reading to them. And then we, in association with East Hampton Library, are giving them library cards where they can go with their parents to choose books in the library there, as well as take the books that they have at the center to the library. That's been very successful so far in getting our parents to take our children to the public library, and also in the best ways to read to them on a nightly basis. We have what we call a Kinder Garden program in association with Amber Waves Farms and Slow Foods, in which we developed a garden this year, and it's up and running. We had a very successful harvest this fall with our garden. And we're also working with a Link, the Language Incorporated company out of New York City, and we're working with them on a partnership where we're bringing literacy to all, hopefully, nonprofit organizations out on the East End. And of course, we're a big part of the East End Fund for Children, which was the cooperation of 7 nonprofit organizations and working with Citarella to fundraise for all of our nonprofits out here to help children, over 4,000 children in this process. The power of partnerships is really important to us as an organization. This is a picture. I'm reading the wrong one, sorry. Mine are out of order, I'm sorry. As a part of our mission, we reach out to local organizations to enhance programming for children and supporting of working families. I just talked about Book Time. We have our Out-Room Classroom and Garden, food pantry that serves 45 families every 2 weeks in partnership with Springs Food Pantry. We have an enhanced art education program with Guildhall. We'll be working with them this fall and producing an opera. We have an athletic program with Super Soccer Stars, which brings young coaches into our center every week to work with our young children. We have a hugely popular program, Kids Free Clothing Exchange, where we provide infant and toddler clothing for people in the community. Special education services and working with OTs and PTs and through Stony Brook and also East Hampton School District. We are the founding members of the East End Fund for Children. And again, we are working with Link. So there's information on that. Next slide. Okay. Can you go back? Do you have the one on the school system?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I think it just might be back in
There it is, okay. Finally, I just wanted to share with you our connection to the East Hampton School District. We're working in a positive process right now to renew our property lease with them to benefit an early start to learning for all our children. We provide community service for high school seniors and juniors at the center. We provide independent skill training for special needs high school students. We've been working with the class there for the past several years. And we provide early intervention therapy for developing delayed students using therapy for speech and executive function, working with also their Director of Special Education, Wendy Lehard, and developmental delays are identified through early intervention by our staff, working with Stony Brook Speech and Language Pathology Graduate School. Okay, now you can go to the picture of Peter.
All right, now you're bringing a flashback. If I could just say, I've been a reader several times at the school, and one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me as supervisor was that I went to be guest reader, and then later in the afternoon, we received a call from the center. They'd been getting calls from parents, and somehow the children, when they heard guest reader, thought Justin Bieber. Did Justin Bieber really read to my kid today? Is what they were getting.
True.
So for about 2 weeks, my staff called me Justin Bieber. No resemblance whatsoever.
Well, your music, yes.
Well, okay.
I just have a, it's always a pleasure when you come to read, Peter, and again, we've had a lot of volunteers do that. I'd just like to end by showing a little video. I know I've taken a lot of time, but again, I appreciate your attention and your patience. And just again, want to thank you for all your support for our center and for the community, because we do support our community in lots of different ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And, you know, the social benefits that we reap from having early childhood development and education, the socialization, all of that is so incredibly important. And, you know, it leads to better citizens. And I just want to also acknowledge that we have an alumni here on the board, David Lees, who I think he turned out pretty spectacular. So
We have over
giving back to the community.
4,000 kids in our community that have come through Eleanor Wilmore who have, come through.
Right, and these become, you know, well-adjusted, you know, contributing members to our society, and that is so important, especially now that we continue to, you know, ensure a sustainable and wonderful future. So thank you all over there at Eleanor Whitmore for all you do.
Yep, thank you.
Do you want me to show the video?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Please, Jason, cue the video.
We're Whitmore kids. We learn through play at the Whitmore Center every weekday. It might look to you like our day is just fun, but we work really hard. Can you guess how it's done? We're Whitmore kids. Growing's what we do, and we're going to share our adventures with you.
The research is really clear that the first 5 years of a child's life are the years in which their whole metabolism, the whole physical, cognitive, social, and emotional world grows the most over time.
We're doing our morning meeting, right, my friends? Yeah. Can we say good morning? Good morning.
Okay, ready? Go ahead. Make some mud. The first 5 years matter because they have to be able to get used to the idea of being in a school setting, being with other children, being away from their parents, which is huge, and being able to play well with others.
The first 5 years matter the most because they're learning social skills, speech development, potty training. They learn how to get along with others outside of the home. Some at home don't have siblings or younger family members around their age.
Okay. Finding stuff out is good exercise for our brains and our hands and our ears and our eyes. Where does that bug go to sleep every night? Why is the moon sometimes out in daylight? Being curious, questioning, and keen to explore make a journey of learning. That's what school's for.
The first 5 years matter because all the social, emotional, and all the wellness is created in child development in those first early years.
What we try to do here is always observe and try to identify anything that you see in a child. Maybe their speech is a little delayed, or maybe their eye contact is off. Anything that we can work with and provide support and services for, we do.
What's your superpower? Ours are words. Saying please and thank you makes our requests heard. From pointing and showing, we move on to speak. Learning word after word, we repeat and repeat till the last they come easy. As we slowly get older and book time helps, our vocabulary grow bolder.
There are a lot of things going on in their little lives. We try to make them feel love here, secure. We love to make them feel they have another place where grown-ups take care of them.
Do you eat your alphabet? We do each day. Apples and broccoli, carrots, hooray! Breakfast and lunch keep us healthy and strong for running and jumping all the day long. Plus 2 healthy snacks let our bodies recharge, and we'll grow from so small to one day so large.
1, 2, 3, Super Soccer Style!
we have soccer stars come in, so we're working on kids' mobility and their ability to share and teamwork.
We are happy to be super soccer stars. We are happy to be super soccer stars. You can never touch the ball with your hand. You can never touch the ball with your hand.
We have mindfulness with Miss Linda, which is wonderful and calming, and she goes to each classroom. To see them be able to lay and breathe and be still, it's so beautiful.
We are resilient. How about you? If we should fall down, we know what to do. Get right back up, brush off our knees, and if others fall down, we show empathy. From teachers and staff, we learn kindness has power, and both trying and failing allows us to flower.
Every child has a different situation in the first 5 years. And so what we're trying to say to parents is that when children have the ability to really explore all those avenues of growth over the first 5 years, they're going to be much better prepared to attend any kind of schooling that they go forward with. It's providing for them an environment in which they can grow and learn to their maximum capacity during those first 5 years.
We're Whitmore kids. We're curious and smart because the Whitmore Center gave us a good start. Our life of learning has started right here, and we know where we'll be in the upcoming years. We're Whitmore kids, and we're on the right path. One day in the future, we'll be top of the class.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you again, Tim. Appreciate that.
Jealous, David.
Your kids went there too, right, David?
Yeah, my two oldest went there for periods of time. I went there when the center was up on Cedar Street, and it was over by back area by the playing field over there then too. Some of my earliest memories from there then too. Yeah, exactly. And as a working family of young kids, it's very difficult to provide childcare.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, and I would just encourage members of the community to get involved and contribute. This is a great program, and we need it sorely. And as we heard today, there is a waiting list, and so there's no shortage of need. So everyone can help out. That brings us up to the tentative budget updates, and we have Rebecca Hanson, our budget director, here just to go over the last few little changes that have been made and updates and where we stand. And I'm happy to report that we believe we're still under the 2% tax cap, but I'll let Becky.
Yes, my notes say good morning, but good afternoon.
Tomorrow already.
Yeah, tomorrow, it's almost tomorrow, I know, I should have packed dinner today. So hopefully third time's the charm here for the 2024 presentation for the budget. So since I have been here last week, again, just the initial numbers with the budget as proposed is just over $95.4 million. That is a 5.25% increase from 2023, or roughly $4.7 million. So since last week, a few requests have trickled in from the town board and departments, but generally speaking, there are very few changes to the tentative budget. So I'll just run through them very quickly. We will be adding $10,000 for the Montauk Senior Nutrition Program. $20,000 will be added for 2 training opportunities, $15,000 for professional development of staff, and $5,000 for the appointed board, so that'll be split between the A and the B fund. An additional $1,700 for the Montauk Chamber of Commerce for a roadside cleaning program that they're going to be starting in 2024, and there is approximately $66,000 in salary adjustments, and some of those include some increases. Some of those also include, we didn't have one employee randomly through IT that was only prorated for 75% of the year, so we had to add back in 25% for her, so that was roughly $30,000. We had another A Fund employee that is now going to be split between A Fund and CA, which is the CPF 2% fund. So again, so that freed up a little extra money for the A Fund. But generally speaking, we are also then going to be adding 2 new revenue sources that the board will be looking at. One is through the Division of Marine Patrol, in addition to dock fees and moorings, and the other one will be a proposal formally before you shortly through the fire marshal for the creation of inspection fees for various inspections that they do annually for all sorts of businesses that they currently don't charge for. So based on the additions and the adjustments that were requested and the additional revenue, that will then bring us into about $10,000 under the tax cap. I do also want to preface that we are still in the midst of negotiating, as the board is aware, 2 special district contracts with the Village of East Hampton that we do anticipate should be settled by the time of the public hearing. And if that is the case, then there is we do anticipate that there will be some additional funding that will be additional funds towards the tax cap. But again, I will be able to report more on that specifically at the time of the public hearing. So if there are any changes to what's currently proposed.
Right. Just to put a little finer point on the increases are going to be offset and balanced by projected increases in revenue that are non-property tax revenue increases. They relate to fees. Apparently, East Hampton is one of the few, if not only, municipalities on Long Island that does not currently charge for a number of types of inspections within the fire marshal's office.
Correct.
We think that it's important to have those costs be offset by the permitting. That is really the reason for permit fees. So we're going to institute that going forward. And there were some adjustments proposed within the fees charged for various things within the Marine Patrol's purview, boat slips, moorings, that sort of thing. So we think that, as Becky said, we'll still be under tax cap by a comfortable margin, which will likely increase. We've been fairly conservative in the budgeting due to, as she said, some of those unresolved contract negotiations at this point. Are there any?
And we're also hopeful too, sorry, Supervisor, that if we do happen to get the retirement bill for next year before, again, the hearing, it's always, we cut it very, very closely. There may be a chance that the town would be able to use some of that reserved fund balance that you do have with the State Comptroller's Office from the Contribution Stabilization Program. But that's an unknown until we actually receive the annual invoice, which is not until sometime the beginning to mid-November.
Any questions, comments? It's basically last call.
Yeah, the only question I have is, I mentioned it yesterday in an email, is the outside professional line for the airport. We have $1.2 million allocated for 2024. We know the DGEIS, draft GEIS is going to, cross over into 2024. We've got the litigation in the second department, and we've also got, Nick Logano working on the Superfund side. So I just, and we've had to make a number of budget modifications this year because we were under. So I was just wondering if we should be appropriating, I guess, more fund balance in order to bring that number
And again, and that's really a judgment call by the town board. Outside professional is one of the most difficult lines to budget because you could have a fiscal year where you have very little litigation and you've over budgeted and perhaps over collected. Even though we don't collect any property tax through the airport fund, but again, there are no other funding than that's outlined, the leases, it's just the net sales with as far as, the fuel, landing fees. Other than that, it's really then you're accessing your fund balance. So certainly the board can choose to increase that amount of the outside professional because again, while we do know we do have the ongoing litigation with the airport, again, in order to increase that, you would have to then increase using fund balance in that budget. So again, that is.
And again, I guess the other way of looking at it is that, we have the reserves there. If we go over budget in that particular line item during that year, there's significant amounts of money there and certainly an adequate amount that could be allocated at that time if we do go over. So, my own personal view is that we should leave that as is. And if we need to, if we go over that number in the budget, then there's money there to accommodate it if necessary. So it's really, half dozen one, six of another, right?
Again, I mean, even if
Could ask Rob
what's proposed.
thinks as far as.
A guess on what the cost will be for
Well,
litigation.
and-
I mean,
and understanding, I mean,
it's
I
a
don't know
crapshoot, really, isn't it?
If we've already allocated $1.2 million by board resolution for the airport draft GEIS. I don't know if we've gotten a breakdown of of that amount, what portion is it for 2023 and what portion is for 2024. I don't recall that being in their proposals.
I think it's an unknown, so I think, you're never really going to be able to predict what outside counsel will be. If we got any additional lawsuits, we'd still be under or over, depending, or if we don't get additional lawsuits. So again, it's such a variable, it's such an unknown. We, based on past practice and past experience, have put a number there. Whether or not we stay within that number, I think really remains to be seen. Bottom line is that in either case, you're not going to be relying on property tax revenue to cover that fee. So it's the board's call.
I think the money can be moved as needed.
I'm comfortable with that also.
And that, so I'm comfortable with what the supervisor suggested.
Anything else?
So we notice on Thursday?
So Thursday will be the notice of public hearing with all the agreed to changes today. Then it will be noticed in the papers next week. The document, the preliminary budget will then be available for the public also next Thursday, the 26th. And then for the public hearing that will be held at the November 2nd, right? I don't know, I keep saying the 3rd, the November 2nd meeting. And Carol, I will send you the updates for the public hearing later today.
And an adoption at the.
And adoption at the November 16th meeting, yes. By law, it must be adopted by November 20th. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, and
so
thank you
much,
for your
Becky. I wanna
support and
thank you.
cooperation. Appreciate it to the board and to the department heads, and again, my staff, who've really just been, hugely dedicated along the whole way. So, thank you.
I thank you all as well.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
That brings up our food scraps diversion pilot program wrap up. And we have Gloria Frazee here.
I did not know that being.
Did you bring
or
us
I knew
any
that-
more finger potatoes?
Sorry. Well, maybe.
Planted
Okay.
mine.
I have one for you, by the way. Mine's starting to bud. I think I need some of that compost to grow it in.
Oh, guess what? I did not bring everyone perfect potatoes. You already got them. But here's a one-pager and some compost. There will be more little bins in Kate's office.
Well, now I have compost for my potato.
Thanks.
And this is what the compost.
Okay. The board,
Cool. Fabulous. Oh,
board
shorter than
supports, I'll
everyone else.
plant my finger potato in that.
Yeah,
Yes.
I will support you.
So you'll notice the top of the compost says transforming food scraps into soil food, and that is what compost is about. So let's start by looking at why I'm here, taking everyone's valuable time to talk about composting. At the conclusion of the Suffolk County water presentation, Supervisor Van Scoik said, quote, "Nothing is more important than our water," unquote. Well, it takes good soil for good water, and compost helps make good soil. So this really ties into what's important in our community, in our town, for the East End. Let's look at the big picture for a moment. Households account for 55% of our 80 million tons of food waste in the United States. That averages out to about $1,850 per household that is purchased and thrown out. Look at that in East Hampton, and you're talking about 11,000 households. That's over $20 million of food scraps that we throw out every single year. And That's just the cost of buying the food. Look at this. We've also got the whole recycling center and the whole trash pickup. So we buy the food, then we pay to have our trash picked up by one of the carting services that crisscross our town, belching diesel as they go. In a single week, down my little block, they make 6 or 7 passes. It's crazy. Then there's the recycling center, where we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for the staff to handle our non-recyclables, and for carters with bigger trucks to haul the waste to incinerators, belching more diesel as they go. What are the local impacts? Our neighborhood streets are invaded daily with armies of garbage trucks. About 30% of their load is food waste, which is trucked to an incinerator in someone else's neighborhood. Between all that trucking and burning, that's a huge carbon footprint. We haven't had a flooding alert here since what? Oh, the weekend? So, in fact, by the time our East Hampton High School seniors right now are thinking about retiring, the East End could well be a series of islands, as you see in this picture. Those blue areas, the darker blue areas, are land. In between is water. And that's not just like a beautiful ocean water. It's filled with remains of destroyed homes and septic systems and oil tanks and cans of paint and oil that we all have stored in our garages. It's almost like we're drowning in our own food waste. But there are local solutions, and that's a lot of doom and gloom, which really makes me want to hide under a blanket, especially when it's cold out like today. Fortunately, there are actions we can take in our own homes. The biggest impact is from reducing waste, which means buying less. It's so simple and so hard at the same time. Reuse includes rescue from supermarkets, restaurants, bakeries, and farms. Recycle. We're talking about food scraps. What are we going to do? We've been talking about food waste. Instead of waste, let's flip it to a resource. Food scraps turn into compost, which returns nutrients to the soil. We've got healthier plants, vegetables with more nutrients for us, and it's great for all of our pollinators because it really looks at the soil structure and builds habitat for them. So the first picture is one of our compost bins or food scrap drop-off bins at the Springs Farmers Market. Then we've got high school kids where they've been scooping compost. And here the high school kids are planting tomatoes in their garden with some of the town compost. So at the,
I thought I went too far, but I think we're good.
at the farmer's market where we had a drop-off, one of the signs said, "Ask us about the potato." A lot of people asked us about the potato. So you've seen the path of the potato already. On the right is the path of the potato. You'll see it's a cycle. You can start anywhere. Let's start with a bowl of crispy hot potatoes, because who doesn't love a potato? So the potato, you can save the food scraps. It goes into, turns into compost. The compost goes into our soil. The potato grows in that soil that is just beautiful and full of nutrients. It withdraws nutrients from the soil and puts them into the potato for us. And then it goes, while it's in the garden, it feeds, potatoes are pollinated only by native buzz bees or bumblebees, not honeybees. So you really need that beautiful soil structure because the native bumblebees live in the soil, not in hives. So if you have bad soil structure with bad nutrients, the bumblebees cannot live in it because they can't penetrate it. So it really is a full cycle, and we're back to the delicious, then nutritious East Hampton potatoes. In the scenario on the left, we're paying for a potato, and then we're paying to haul it away and burn it. Along the way, we're creating greenhouse gases and depleting the nutrients in our soils. It's our choice to create more greenhouse gases or to participate in the cycle that transforms food scraps into soil food. So how did the program work? We had 2 drop-offs, farmers market Saturdays in Springs and Sag Harbor. We were just going to have Springs, but then Marianne Eddy, yay, from our advisory committee team, wanted a drop-off in Sag Harbor, so she rolled up her sleeves and made it happen. Shout out to Marianne. Here's how the food scrap drop-off worked. At each location, food scraps dropped off their vegetable and fruit peels. This is a high school volunteer on the right. Hi, Savi. And then on the left is Barbara Jo Howard, who actually came from Montauk and combined it with various things she had to do around here anyway. Next, we checked every bit for contaminants. Let me tell you, some of it was totally icky. Sophie, one of the Rewild Long Island summer interns staffing the booth, said about the process, "I've been scarred." Another intern, also from East Hampton High School, said during our commendation ceremony, "My least favorite part of the summer internship was sorting the food scraps. My favorite part of summer internship was that we did it together as a group." I think Kelly really nailed how important this is for us as individuals and a community. Then we finally hauled the compost to our own pile at the recycling center, and that's another high school student, Abe, showing off that week's edition. And you can see the pile behind him growing. Along the way, we got some pretty good press at the start and throughout the summer. This helped us get the word out and keep it going, thanks to the East Hampton Star, WSHU, East End Beacon, East Hampton Press, and Newsday. Weekly drop-off amounts. We started slow with about 56 pounds the first week. We made those fancy business cards that you've got on top of the compost bin there that I handed out. There's little Mina. She started early, and she was a regular. And you'll see from these images that we did not pass out bins. There's already too much plastic on our planet, and we all have something at home that is great for storing scraps. On the upper right-hand corner, that's another regular Deva, modeling her quart jar and snack jug. But the weekend, or each week, the drop-off amounts grew. That's Lola, another high school student, staffing the table, and grew. So we've got more with Lola. We've got a lot of people who started coming, and grew some more. Our total haul was 2,782 pounds. And this is Sophie from the high school. She, who was scarred, it looks as though she's recovered, fortunately. And yes, we ended up making 1.4 tons of food scraps. What does that mean for a carbon offset? How did that impact our greenhouse gas emissions? The food scraps we diverted in this pilot is the carbon dioxide equivalent of driving 3,025 miles in a passenger car. And this is taking into account only the net difference from collecting food scraps versus what would have been spent anyway. So there really is, in this small pilot, tiny pilot, we made a big difference. Imagine what we could do if we can grow. There were a couple of mini pilots embedded in here. We worked with a restaurant, the Surf Lodge in Montauk. They had a special dinner where they worked with the staff and collected scraps that night. We did a huge amount of learning, so we feel comfortable in ways that we can implement in very interested restaurants who want to also participate in this. That's Tabitha Hirsch, who is now at Brown studying environmental education and sustainability. So it's great to have these partnerships in town. Marianne Eddy also worked with the Sag Harbor Farmers Market, and any scraps from the Sag Harbor's market they collected. And I also worked with Field Studies Flora, which is a high-end florist. who had a huge party, had a lot of cut flowers left over, and we took in those too. So what can we do to build these partnerships and expand the program? The program itself was at capacity with some 50 households dropping off food scraps. These community members were consistently showing up and engaging. We had a lot of great conversations. It feels as though we built a compost community. And you can see we had, that's little Willa in the upper left-hand corner. She had the best idea for storing food scraps. If you didn't have room in your fridge or freezer to keep the scraps so they didn't get so icky and scar Sophie and the rest of us, you can keep the food scraps in your own ice chest. Everyone's got some ice blocks around. So that's great. And we had people of all ages with their own bins, their coffee containers. We even had lots of dogs showing up with their owners. So this became part of the community, part of their Saturday morning schedule. And it really felt as though we're contributing to something bigger than ourselves. Oh, here's the perfect participation potato, just in case you didn't want it left out. Folks came every single week, and about halfway through, they were awarded the coveted perfect participation potato. There was a huge learning curve. The picture on the left is early on. You will see lots of produce stickers. That's the worst thing. They're ubiquitous, and they're pain to pick off, but they're plastic, and no one wants bits of plastic or the other contaminants here, bottle caps or bits of string or twist ties or cherry pits popping up in the garden. We sorted with people who were there dropping off their food scraps and gave immediate feedback. There was a lot of ick. But by the end, we managed to train people, work with people to really drop off beautiful, clean scraps. And you'll see in the middle picture here, under organizers, that's Craig Fick at the recycling center, and he helped handle all of our food scraps, and he reported back this week to say that contamination was just about zero. He didn't find a single bit of contamination. So shout out to East Hampton High School team for your fabulous work. And we're closely monitoring how the food pile is composting. So it's its own separate area, its own separate thing, and we're using it as another learning lab to see what we can be doing next year. On the left-hand side is Marianne Eddy. Those are one of the bins that we use to transport the food scraps from the farmer's market to the recycling center. And that is me on the right in my driveway sorting through 55 pounds of Surf Lodge food scraps. It was a long summer in so many ways, but we learned a lot. The power of partnerships and community cannot be overstated. Rewild Long Island was huge with the summer program interns who staffed the table in Springs. The East Hampton Town Board, especially Kate Rogers, thank you so much, and Sylvia Overby, you guys rock. The Energy and Sustainability Committee with Paul Munoz, Concerned Citizens of Montauk, Balsam Farms with Ian Calder Piedmont, Mark Habner, Beth Fateni, and Riverhead. They're working on the Riverhead composting program. Mary Morgan in Southold, she did the composting pilot there. So we're really building a network, not just within East Hampton, but on the East End, on Long Island. And with Mark and Beth, I'm also working on the group called Taking a Lead on Zero Waste for Long Island. And we're really looking at best practices in our area, how we can learn from each other, how we can work with the waste haulers, the carters, the landfill people, and really look at every step along the way when it comes to the waste stream that we are generating, which is huge. And it's not, as I mentioned, it's not just about the waste, it's also about all of the greenhouse gases that we are creating throughout this process. And basically, we're shipping our trash for other people to deal with, which doesn't seem right either. I think we need to deal with it on local and individual basis. Community support has been crazy huge. Usually when you send an email for a small nonprofit, there's a 49% open rate. Our email open rate is about 78%. These people are really engaged. They really want to do this. So I'll just read a couple of these. These are a few of the community support statements I received. I know Carol has received a whole lot more. I was CC'd and BCC'd on a couple of them. I've never tried composting before. I cut way down on the amount of trash I needed to haul to the recycling center. It's important for the environment. You'd see me year-round if it was available. Thank you for doing this. I'll see you in the spring. There is so much garbage, and I really like the idea of it becoming something else. It was really easy. It just became part of the routine. Oh, that's Michelle, and that was her dog, Rooney, that I pointed out earlier. So I really got to know these people. We got to know each other. It's really building a community within our town. And as Maura said, it's just the right thing to do. How much soil food did we create? Our compost, if you look at it, the weights and the average compost creation from it, from the soil, from the food scraps, that's about 400 to 500 pounds of compost that we made. And compost is really black gold. It's full of nutrients. Fruits and vegetables are healthier as plants, and for us, there's a reduced need for fertilizer. Compost also acts like a sponge. It holds water, it reduces runoff, and it reduces the amount of irrigation needed in our gardens. It improves the soil structure. So we're talking healthier soils, healthier water, healthy environment, healthier community. In summary, we had great community participation. We collected a lot more food scraps than I anticipated, or my back, or my husband's truck, which has to be retired, imagined. We reduced the contamination rate throughout the summer. We reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and we got fabulous community support. And reducing our greenhouse gas emissions contributes to East Hampton's net zero and sustainability goals. We heard about them in the Senior Center presentation, and they are front and center in the upcoming Renewable Energy Roadmap. This is just hugely important for us as a community. Recommendations: expand the program, more accessible with more days of the week, more drop-off locations, like ideally at the supermarket, CSAs and farm stands. Can we target yoga studios and houses of worship? Can we go year-round? Extend education. I'm working on, or I met a number of school teachers over the summer at the table. A number of them requested, oh, do you have a class you can give or a presentation you can give to our students? How can we do that, involve our students? So I've done a lot of education before of little kids, so I'm working on some curriculum, some materials, so I have a one-off presentation to do in classes. Also, I talked with a lot of people about home composting, and people are really interested in it. How can we make the cycle even tighter, even smaller, so we don't even have any transportation from the home to a drop-off location, but how can we develop a home composting community within our town that supports each other, that we can learn from each other and do it in our own backyards? The high school students are pretty excited by this project too. I've gotten donations of a couple of different types of composters to the high school. So this is one of the things we're looking at, is how can they have home composting demonstration at the high school and have the kids lead it, which would be outstanding. And this also contributes to our, our climate change goals, our net zero goals, so it's just huge. The other thing is to look at reducing food waste at the get-go and plastics. So we're looking at from purchase, how can we purchase less, be more mindful of our purchases, plan our meals a bit better, to storage. Did you know, that's a reminder for me, the radish tops, that once you harvest vegetables and it's got those green tops on there, you want to cut them off, because after they're harvested, all those green tops are doing is pulling moisture from your vegetable, so your vegetable is shrinking faster. So it's just little tips like this that can help reduce waste, be more knowledgeable. And actually this summer at the farmer's market, I started talking about chop your tops. And I went around or I had people go to the table, and we chopped their tops off. So in this total, there are a number of chopped tops too. Okay, next, community growth. What will it take? More volunteers. Volunteers make all the difference, and partnerships extend our reach. And we couldn't do this without volunteers and without partnerships, and the town's been really great. What we really, really need to grow from the town that would be so helpful would be just the basic transportation from the drop-off locations to the town recycling center. How can we manage that? My husband is selling his truck, so if anyone wants to buy a 1995 G-Wagon, there's going to be one for sale. But it also means that my own transportation for this is going away. And we're going to be more days of the week in more locations. We want to also expand to Montauk, so poor Barbara Jo doesn't drive all the way to Springs. She is a good friend, but let's have people in Montauk dropping off food scraps, Amagansett, East Hampton Village, Bridgehampton. How can we keep growing the locations, making it more accessible to a larger part of our community? So I'd like everyone to join us. I want to thank you all for your support, your attention, and I look forward to working with you this coming year. We'll be back in the spring, I hope. And if anyone here wants the one-pager or is listening, wants the one-pager, or wants to join us in composting or volunteering or in planning this coming year, please email me right there at easthamptoncompost@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Terrific program, and glad to see that it was so well supported and you had so many people interested in continuing it. And, as you said, you can also compost at home. I think it's great. It shortens that cycle that you talk about. Transportation's not necessary, maybe just a wheelbarrow or a bucket out to your garden for the composting. And it's just terrific. So,
and you'll teach people how to raise chickens on your food scraps.
well, now you've mentioned chickens, I'll have to say that is my chickens' first stop when I open up the pen to let them out to free range for a while. They literally race each other to the compost pile to scratch through and see if they can find grubs or other little morsels. So.
Delicious. Thank you. And I feel sort of nostalgic now after this summer, because I really met a lot of great people. This is a great community, and we can do this.
Gloria, I just want to thank you so much. I mean, you created this program and you had help with Mary and Eddie. You brought all the student interns in who did such great work. And the amount of awareness that you raised, I think when we set goals for the beginning of this program, you far exceeded every single goal that was set. And it wouldn't have happened without you. You're not singly because of the community that you created, but you certainly are the engine that started everything. And I really really appreciate your work and your volunteerism for our community.
Thank you, and we'll be bigger next year.
Thank you, Gloria.
I just want to say to Gloria, she is the spark plug that has made this program happen. I did very little, and thank you for recognizing the small effort that I did with Kate. Kate did a much bigger job. But you are that spark plug that makes a difference, and it's going to make a difference for our community, so thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to our last agenda topic to discuss today, and it's the Renewable Energy Roadmap Final Draft. And we have our very own Samantha Klein here. Good afternoon, Samantha.
Good afternoon. Great to see everybody. So I'm going to do a couple slides and introduce the project, and then we have our team of consultants here virtually that they're going to do a bulk of the presentation today.
So we have GDS Associates and Optany.
Yep, exactly.
Screen from their end, or should we do it from ours?
I guess either works. If Josh, if you're there and able to share your screen, that could work, and I'll run through the first few slides here.
It's fine. Since I gotta wait for you to stop sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot I was still on share. I apologize.
Should work. Let me know.
Yes. All right, great. So the Renewable Energy Roadmap is meant to serve as an actionable guidance document that specifically advises the town on what we should be doing next to reach our renewable energy and energy efficiency goals. Climate change is a future threat, but it's also something that we're already facing the impacts of. The town is tackling climate issues from separate but equally important avenues of climate adaptation as well as climate mitigation. The Renewable Energy Roadmap definitely serves as that climate mitigation component of things. Next slide, please. The Renewable Energy Roadmap, it's posted on the town website in its entirety, so we definitely encourage anyone to look through that. Today, we're going to discuss some of the analysis and background data, community outreach efforts and their results, and some of the core recommendations and how those efforts and analyses impacted the strategies that the plan puts forward. Next slide. The town has adopted important goals for our community that have laid the foundation and direction for the development of this plan. The major one being a goal to meet the equivalent of 100% of community-wide energy consumption with renewable energy sources by 2030. The development of the roadmap started with analysis of existing energy consumption in the community and forward projections. It then looks at paths to reach the town's goals through reducing energy consumption, electrifying end uses, and increasing the renewable energy supply. Another guiding resolution is the town's climate emergency declaration, stating that the town will consider climate mitigation and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in all town projects, policies, and decision-making. The roadmap identifies strategies. It then also quantifies them by the level of impact that they have towards our goals, the timeline to complete them, and the financial costs of implementing them. They also do estimations of the staff time required to implement those actions too. Next slide. So the town has already made significant progress in the sustainability and renewable energy space. I think a part of what makes accomplishments impressive lies in the challenges and difficulties to get there. In East Hampton Town's case, a lot of it is that we're on the forefront of really taking action in a lot of these ways, whether that's been in completing the first solar and battery storage system on a municipal building in all of Long Island, in launching new educational series on sustainability and energy efforts with LTV and local experts contributing to that, or working with NYSERDA to make our building codes more energy stringent in their rating indexes than even the state requires. An updated list of all of our energy sustainability accomplishments are available on the town website. Next slide. So the consultants that worked on this project were GDS Associates and Optany. They have extensive experience working on other similar plans for renewable energy and climate action. We've had a really positive experience working with their team, and we think this plan has some strong content. I also just want to recognize that the working team on this has been myself, Councilwoman Rogers, Kim Shaw, Morgan Slater, and Jeremy Samuelson, as well as members of our Energy Sustainability Committee, Craig Van Sickle, Lena Tabori, and Paul Muniz. So I just definitely want to mention their names because there is a tremendous amount of time, but also brain power developed to the whole guidance of this document. Yeah, and with that, I'll hand over to Josh Duckwall from GDS.
Okay, thanks, Sam. I want to echo your crew and the Sustainability Committee and council members have been supportive. It's got to be, what, 2.5 years at this point. Overturning every rock we could get a hold of, and along the way, asking for as many opinions as we could handle. And I think that shows really well in the report. And I definitely want to reiterate, we're going to hit the highlights today, but it's a very long document posted, and we think it does a good job of building the case and showing the options. But as Sam said, I'm Josh Tuckwell, GDS Associates. Coleman Thompson from Optany is also on the line. We had a few other team members. We chose to pick the prettiest ones for today. So we'll just kind of run through a bit of what we think you want to hear. And since you've already been sitting for 4 hours at least, we'll encourage you to reach out with more questions offline. But Optany and GDS, we go back to work in North Carolina and Durham County for Optany, and GDS is working on a renewable energy and climate action plan for the city of Durham, work that continues to this day. We're actually moving through with the city of Durham to write the implementation RFPs for our recommendations. So across the country, both firms have been doing great work, a lot in the West and a lot in the Southeast and the Northeast as well. Midwest seems to escape us a little bit, but we'll figure it out. The point being, we pull national best practices in around, and that is what we intended to and moved forward with our initial meetings with Sam and her crew. So what you'll see in the report, we start with building the base case, as any of these good plans will do, and you're immediately going to recognize the graph looks a little different than what you have printed out. I inadvertently dropped in a different graph where we were actually just looking at the baseline through our target year, which is 2030, when we later on decided it made more sense to look through 2040, primarily from a lot of it having to do with LIPA's goal for 70% renewable 2030 and 100% by 2040, and thought, being that our plan targets 2030, the team started to realize that a further view forward would make sense as well. So what you're looking at actually is megaton CO2 equivalents. It's a nerdy term that energy and carbon analysts use for trying to bundle everything in an apples to apples comparison. And the main takeaways here is the drivers for your emissions, and that's kind of at the core of your renewable energy plan. Your emissions for building, heating, and vehicles are the I guess key suspects in what we're looking at. What we wanted to do was set up a metric ton, CO2 equivalent going out to 2040, and then use this scenario graph to show how the measures that we're going to talk about would affect this as the baseline. You can read more about how this works with and without the South Fork Wind Farm in the report. Just a couple of assumptions about what we were using. These are typically what gets questioned when there are analysis done like this. Population growth rate is typically very much a point of contention for places that we work. We went with 1.5%. Based on input back from the town itself, your posted reports and projections going forward, which you could kind of go back and forth on all day. As I mentioned, the LIPA grid promise for 70% renewable, 100% by 2040. I got to say, take those with a grain of salt. for sure when we're projecting the future and calling it the business as usual. Electrification of buildings and vehicles is what we consider fairly modest. Buildings don't electrify themselves very quickly without some incentives or forced market. But we do think the EV market itself would have a roughly 32% share in the town of East Hampton by 2030. Lifetime of vehicles affects all of that. We've done a couple of these. One for City of Durham was right at 12 years, so 11.8 year lifespan for your typical light duty vehicle is, we think, reasonable. Looking at solarized and energized East Hampton programs in progress, we came up with some solar tracks that, as unadjusted, track out to 2030 in the same trajectory, maybe a little bit more aggressive, and more efficient heat pumps, of course. We talk about coefficients of performance, the COPs, and without getting into it, if you know SEER, then COPs work the same way. But we had to pick a range for our electrification equipment, so we settled on a 2.5 background number. Coleman, I was going to talk about these.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Sam, for your great introductions. I'm Coleman. I'm with Optiny, and I was helping work on a lot of the analysis underlying some of these results. So I'm here to talk about some of the technical items as well as discuss the survey. So first of all, we have two graphs here. This is showing the energy gap projected over the next 20 or so years. And we've got two charts here. I'll start by discussing the one on the left, but the main difference between the two is that one of them includes the South Fork wind farm megawatt hours built into the electricity. That's that big light blue block on the right-hand graph. What we've got here is the town's total energy consumption split up by energy source. So what we have is sort of like layers of a pie. And the uppermost layers above that yellow line are going to be your vehicles. So there's gasoline consumption is that big gray slice in the middle for vehicles. And then it will also include fossil fuel building heating. So that's those three slices on the top. Below the yellow line, that's all of our electricity. And that's also split up into renewable and non-renewable sources. So we can actually see here how the grid is getting more green over time in our projections, according to LIPA's pledge. We can see that by 2030, it's gotten to about roughly 70% renewable. And we can see that by 2040, it's gotten to 100% renewable. So that's the electricity, and that's the building heating and vehicle heating. There are a couple of things I want to draw your attention to here that are some interesting trends from gasoline-powered cars over to electric vehicles. And it turns out that when you do the actual kilowatt-hour to kilowatt-hour unit of energy comparison, that results in less energy overall being used. So as Josh mentioned, for example, we're assuming that our heat pumps have a coefficient of performance of 2.5 that we've assumed in the model. And what that means is that for the same kilowatt-hours of heating, you're spending less heating, less electricity to get that using a heat pump than you would be if you were spending, the equivalent kilowatt hour to get the equivalent kilowatt hours of heating than you would be spending in terms of like natural gas or fuel oil. So we're actually projecting the overall energy consumption to decline because of switching to more efficient sources. And this is again projected as a baseline in the status quo. So we assume that there's some amount of electrification, both of buildings and of vehicles in the status quo. So then the other thing I want to call your attention to is, of course, the major difference between these two, which is the wind farm. So in the right graph, we are including the wind farm's megawatt hours, and in the left graph, we are not. The report discusses the possible ways the town could try to claim the megawatt hours in a lot more detail, but we do not generally assume that it is automatic. So a lot more detail about that in the report but this is the sort of overall gap analysis that we came up with for the status quo over the next several years. Next slide, please, Josh. So just some numbers here and some broad takeaways. First of all, even if the town pursues the wind farm recs, there is still an energy gap of 61%. So if we go back to that last slide, what we'll see is that even with the wind farm, the renewable slice by 2030 is still not a majority even. It's not close to the goal. So we can see 2030 is right about in the middle of that rightmost graph. And the renewable sources here are just the wind farm, renewable electricity coming from the grid, and solar generated in the community. And as you can see, in 2030, that takes up most of the electricity, but that does nothing to offset our existing building heating. It does nothing to offset gasoline-powered vehicles continuing to drive around. So if we go next slide, please, Josh. That brings us to one of our most important conclusions from this section of the slides, which is that vehicles and building heating are producing our primary gap if we pursue the wind farm. And even if we don't pursue the wind farm, there's still the primary gap. So that means that our primary focus should be electrifying vehicles and buildings as that last stubborn bit to get to our goal. And it's, as you can see in the last slide, it's a pretty big mountain to climb. Next slide, please, Josh. So next I want to discuss the stakeholder and public surveys. So we did some surveys to basically sample the community and sample town staff stakeholders just in order to engage the community and get a sense of what people want to do, what people's most important issues are. For the staff stakeholder survey, we received 27 responses. The most important issues that we identified, and we'll show you how some of this breaks down in a second, were public EV adoption, providing incentives for solar developers and for property owners, supporting solar microgrid projects, as well as increasing funding availability for individuals and small businesses for renewable energy and building electrification. Next slide, please. So this is just a breakdown of how we actually structured the survey, giving an example question. So what we did was we split up some of these policy pursuits into different categories. So here we see the transportation category. And what we did was we asked stakeholders to rank one of the options that, the 5 options or 4 options that we gave them depending on the category. So in this visualization, what we see is the 5 transportation policies that we presented, displayed by what percentage of them were ranked, what percentage of respondents ranked each strategy first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So here we can see that the EV adoption is ranked as the most important strategy because over 50% of stakeholder respondents ranked it first as their most important preferred strategy. We can see how some of these other strategies stack up here. So for example, battery electric buses and retrofitting transit maintenance facilities is second, and a little under 25% of respondents ranked that as their first preferred strategy for transportation. Next slide, please, Josh. So here's another example. Here's energy policy. So we had incentive programs for solar developers, improving efficiency and reducing cost of solar design and permitting, developing a community choice aggregation program, which is one of our key recommendations in the report, which I'll discuss in a little bit. And create a net zero or stretch to zero energy rating index or home energy rating system, and establish a workforce development program, including renewable energy jobs. And we're ranked in that order from most to lowest priority. So as we can see, the incentive programs for solar developers are the most strongly preferred. They have the highest overall score, and were ranked first by the most respondents. Next slide, please, Josh. So we also did a public survey. This survey received 178 respondents. Overall, we found that residents were most interested in pursuing renewable energy. We also found that the majority of residents supported installing more solar and battery projects, providing incentives for those projects, and providing other assistance for renewable energy. We also found that 76% of respondents were extremely or somewhat interested in making their next vehicle purchase an electric vehicle. Furthermore, we found that majorities of respondents indicated a willingness to pay more for renewable energy, and we'll show you some of those results in a second. We also found, and we overall recommend, that the town should continue to engage community stakeholders through public meetings, community forums, social media, and other digital platforms, because we think there's evidence that a lot of people care about these issues, that people are willing to potentially pay more for renewable energy, and that respondents are interested and engaged in dealing with climate change. Next slide, please, Josh. So here's respondents to the public survey ranking their most important sustainability issues, and this is where we see renewable energy kind of rising to the top. Pretty much the same format as the stakeholder survey, where we asked respondents to gauge their interest in different sustainability issues. And so, of course, renewable energy rose to the top, with over 75% of respondents stating that they had the most interest in renewable energy, followed by responsible waste management, green and low energy buildings, clean air, walkability and bike accessibility, and electric vehicles coming in last. Next slide, please, Josh. We also identified actions that the town residents think are the most important. So first here is installing more solar and battery storage to provide cleaner electricity for energy needs. And again, last here is increasing electric vehicle adoption and charging access. So kind of an interesting contrast that we noticed between the stakeholder survey and the public survey, that the stakeholders seem to place a lot of emphasis on electric vehicles, and for town public respondents, there was a little bit less emphasis there, which we thought was interesting. Next slide, please. So this is support for renewable electricity and for community solar. So what this is the number of respondents who would pay X amount more per month for either 100% renewable electricity or for community solar. And so we have a lot of responses here that range throughout lots of different price points, but the overall point here is that a majority of respondents did signal that they would be willing to pay more for the renewable electricity, and some respondents would be willing to pay quite a lot more. So I think that we found that there is quite a lot of public support for renewable electricity and for community solar, even if those policies come with a higher electricity bill. Next slide, please, Josh. So with all of this in mind, and after all of our analysis and doing all these surveys and running the numbers and writing this report, we found that the most impactful strategies for the town are pursuing a CCA, community choice aggregation, an EV incentive, and a building electrification incentive, with the CCA being the most cost-effective and impactful immediate strategy to improve the town's energy mix. The EV incentive and building electrification incentives also rose to the top because, while a CCA would only address the grid mix, as I pointed out earlier, existing fossil fuel heating and internal combustion engine vehicles are going to be the most stubborn and long-lasting, and really the most difficult to directly address by town policymakers, element of the remaining gap. So it's really important that the town gets on top of that. And again, the report talks about this in much more detail than we have really time to discuss here. But it's really important that the town really gets on top of that as soon as possible, because those are going to be the most challenging to deal with. We also found that the town should explore purchasing the South Fork Wind Farm RECs, and that the town ought to streamline permitting, update building codes, and organize buying pools to improve infrastructure, which are all just chipping away at that massive gap that is, again, a lot of it is in the built infrastructure. And if anything that the town can do, and we have lots and lots of strategies that we recommend in the report to pursue that goal, but the town really should be doing everything that it can to chip away at that infrastructure gap, at that fossil fuel heating that is taking up such a large portion of the gap. Next slide, please, Josh. So this is what the scenario looks like after some of the interventions. So a couple of things here. The first thing is we can see the CCA. The colors are, I think, a little bit different here, but we can see the CCA down at the bottom. This is sort of the same as that chart I showed earlier, where it's energy. And again, we can see energy declining over time. We can see once again that the top half above the yellow dashed line is our vehicle fueling and fossil fuel heating in our buildings. And below is our electricity, and it's split up into different renewable sources and grid and non-renewable electricity. So what we've got here is a CCA that is modeled into this scenario. That's that big blue block. And we've set that up, at least as far as the model parameters go, for about 70% participation, and we've set it up as an opt-out CCA that is implemented in, looks like 2024. And so that reduces the grid non-renewable percentage by a lot. But as you can see, it doesn't affect the built infrastructure from heating, from fossil fuel heating, and it doesn't affect internal combustion engine vehicles. So that's what those incentives are really there to do. And it is pretty difficult to see a substantial difference here because incentives are not cheap, and it's to get to the point that you need to be by 2030, you need to invest a huge amount of money in incentives in order to actually reach completely getting every ICE vehicle off the road and getting every piece of built infrastructure with an electric heat pump. And we've actually balanced our plan to remain within budgetary constraints so that the town isn't spending money it doesn't have. And again, the report discusses all of this in a lot more detail, but this is the scenario with the interventions that we identified as being the most cost-effective and the most realistic. And exactly which interventions is discussed, again, in a lot more detail in the report. But this is our sort of final intervened recommendation. Next slide, please, Josh.
Yeah, that's the Colin. That's another way to put it. That's the everything on graph that you just looked at. There are details by measure, by FTE requirements for the town, budget constraints, projected costs by measure in the appendices of the report. And just real quickly, wanted to touch on the timeline for a 2030 target goal plan. Is nothing short of maddening. Everything has to happen right now, the important things at least. So we pulled pieces out of the report. Again, this is easier to read in the report, but our primary recommendations in the solar and the CCA markets have activity starting, primary activity in the darker colors and secondary activity in the brighter colors. For solar and CCA happening in 2024, and what we recommend for this scenario for energy policies and programs and for all the other scenarios, to set up checkpoints as you near 2030 or even halfway. We took this out to 2040 just for effect. We can't imagine that they would be set up and then removed immediately. So we thought 2040 would be reasonable to showcase. And as Coleman mentioned, the South Fork Wind Farm REX purchase, fairly heavy in investment in the first year, and then a casual FTE requirement after that. Individual energy projects, building electrification manually, going door to door, or funding it directly is not feasible. As he mentioned, the incentives for the electrification and the improvements are taking the lion's share of the energy project schedule and effort. These incentives will be heavy for the size of buildings and the effort that needs to happen. The other efforts supporting it, permitting and updating codes, large-scale microgrid consulting, energy storage, which we talk about really at a high level in the report. These are sort of secondary efforts to moving the needle heavy on the actual electrification of the buildings. And transportation, of course, focused almost entirely on EV incentives. There are plenty of folks that will argue based on what marketing and media they see that EVs are coming and they're everywhere, and they're all arriving tomorrow, and they're just going to be at every door. But the research shows otherwise. So we do think incentives would be the only way to push purchases. And we're talking both chargers and vehicle purchase incentives. More public EV charging and solar PV on the parking lot structures with the stations are sort of nice to haves here. Same thing with e-bike and personal mobility options. But we think the lion's share of the funding should go towards the EV incentives themselves. And that's the schedule at a high level. I didn't know maybe if Sam was going to come back up or not, but at this point we can hold for questions right now. So thank you everyone for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Josh and Coleman, for the presentation. There's quite a bit of information here, I think, for us to digest and understand. If we could just go back to like the last couple graphs you showed, I'm just a little confused by those, as there doesn't seem to be a key as to the different color shadings for the timeline of recommended interventions and
oh, for the timeline slide,
page
yeah, that's
19, 20, 21.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
I just don't understand quite how that's set up. You
Sure.
have dark blue, light blue, you have gray, you have sort of a light gray.
Oh, in the timelines, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So what we have here is the dark blue is strategies that we've identified as being the most cost-effective and the most sort of high priority.
All right, there's a key there. So high priority, cost effective.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the CCA is one of those. So that's highlighted. On the next slide, I believe you'll see building incentives highlighted as well. And then it's the blue means that the strategy is being like actively implemented at that point, or requires like an active investment.
So like the light sky blue.
Yeah. So those are yeah, exactly. And then the gray. So we've got two shades of gray just to stratify these so that they don't all blend together going down. But yes, that light sky blue is intervention being implemented, and the dark blue is strategies that we've identified as the sort of most impactful and most cost effective. That is not to say that we don't think that these light blue strategies are necessary. We do think that they're necessary, but we've identified, sort of called out the ones that are the sort of bulk of the impact here.
Okay. Understood. That's helpful.
And again, sorry, I left the legend off. It is in the report that follows the same schedule.
So it might be helpful to get that key put on the slides so that the general public will be able to understand.
Sure. Of course.
Can update the presentation to reflect that. Any other questions at this point or comments from board members on the presentation?
No, I would like to review the documents I have.
Yeah, I think that's the most
Maybe we can
important
get back and bring this back up in November.
Yeah,
That's
it's
okay.
153 pages to go through, so they made the presentation as brief as possible, but there's a lot more to digest in here.
And then I know, we've had a number of efforts starting back, I think, in 2018 with regard to rooftop solar for residential properties, actually signed on for that initial project. And, currently my house is producing 123% of all the electricity over the last 5 years. That's lifetime. So I'm actually feeding clean electricity back onto the grid. I know due to clearing restrictions and whether or not properties are really capable of taking advantage of that, is an impact. And, to the extent that we can continue to encourage people to put rooftop solar on where that's practicable, it makes a difference. I agree, just like for myself, looking at trying to become greener, it's that home heating is really a difficult situation. At a certain point, I'm going to reach the life expectancy of that existing heating system, and that might be an opportunity to change over for people building new homes. To look at those more efficient and greener systems to begin with is important. So we have an awful lot to do here to get to our goal, as you can see. And it's going to take a concerted effort from the board and from the community and probably some outside consultants to help us get there.
Yeah, so we are now, I mean, that was such a successful program, the Electrify, the Energize program. Solarize and Energize, and now Kim and Sam are working on reinvigorating the program with looking for new providers, and then another big education push. We're also looking as far as furthering goals in the town to put together next year a renewable energy summit, where we're going to be bringing in all of people who do suppliers of heat pumps and EVs, and opening this up to the public along with some keynote speakers to offer the opportunity to show folks that these new ways of heating and et cetera across the board that are more sustainable and produce less greenhouse gases are already happening and are doable. So we're looking forward to just getting those programs restarted on what we can do. I know CCA, Southampton's we're keeping a close watch on what's happening with Southampton in their pursuit of CCA. As we know, there were regulatory hurdles. I want to make sure that those are cleared, but we already passed that legislation. We're just waiting for those hurdles on the outside to happen. We're set and ready to go to begin the investigation into CCA as long as the path is available to us outside of the town. You, my fellow board members in a previous board, you already did that work. So we'll move forward with all that and bringing in as much renewable energy as we can.
Can I ask a question, Kate, or Sam? I mean, here it talks, there's, some of the charts changed from when they were sent around yesterday, so, and there's with South Fork Wind and without South Fork Wind, and they talk about renewable energy credits and pursue the wind farm. Can you explain why it's being looked at, two different scenarios?
Yes.
So first I want to preface, a renewable energy credit is a type of credit that's become popular to pursue. You buy them, renewable energy credits. Whether we can do that with South Fork Wind is debatable on who actually will get those credits. But the impact of South Fork Wind creating enough renewable energy for 77,000 homes on the South Fork doesn't change whether we get a formal piece of paper or not for that credit. I think we already have the credit for that personally, and I've said that to the consultants.
Yeah, that was a very lengthy and complicated conversation that we had, because basically everything from the wind farm, it does go to the grid, and the grid services more than just the town of East Hampton. But there's a lot of other arguments to make there. I mean, one of them is that electrons can take the place of the path of least resistance and go to the closest one nearby, which would be the town of East Hampton. There's also that the original intent of the project in the RFP was about servicing the town of East Hampton as well as the town of Southampton. And there are also the arguments of if the wind farm would have even been possible if not for the work of the town of East Hampton and, all those conversations with the community. So there's all these other arguments of the technicality of the grid and what the grid services versus what the project was, what it entailed, and, if we do have some kind of informal claim to that, but it's an interesting conversation. So ultimately, both of those scenarios are in the report and available.
Yeah, I think it was just confusing, and that's why I brought it up for clarification.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Yeah. Onward, upward. We thank you, Sam, and our consultants from GDS and from
for all your work on this.
And Councilmember Rogers, thank you for leading the charge on renewable energy roadmap, along with our natural resources department.
And members of the Energy Sustainability Committee who also spent a lot of time reviewing this as well.
Yes, thank you all. Moving on now, we have liaison reports. Kathy, do you have a report for us today?
I do. I just wanted to make a couple of announcements since this is our last work session until November 14th. Human Services is having an Appreciating Diversity lecture on November 2nd at 11 a.m. with Robin Berger-Gaston from Family Service League. The purpose of the presentation is to address the issues that many face due to their gender identity,
sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, age, and gender. And there's going to be an activity for seniors to discuss their differences and how there are advantages in diversity in groups. We're also bringing back our Wellness 60 Plus Mindful Movement program, and it's free for the 60 plus community, and that's on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock at the East Hampton Senior Center. We also have a Drug Take Back Day coming up. That's going to be on Saturday, October 28th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. here at Town Hall. We're going to be located in the back parking lot. And there's just want folks to know there's no need to remove labels or take pills out of containers. They can just simply toss it in a disposable bag and drop it off at the drive-through location. The service is free and anonymous, and all forms of medication will be accepted with the exception of liquid medications, syringes, and business professional waste. This was an initiative that our East Hampton Town Police Department started in 2014 as a way to get potentially dangerous medications properly disposed of, keep our communities safe, and as well as our environment safe. And then I think I had just wanted to say that the work being done right now at the YMCA is running on schedule, and they're still working on the roof, and the HVAC project is going to start shortly. And the last thing I wanted to say is that we have a work session a town board meeting on Thursday. The public hearing is on the draft wireless master plan. It's our second public hearing, and I know how critical cell service is to our community. We only had one speaker when we had the public hearing back in July. It'd be nice to hear from the community on that since it's such a critical program. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Kathy.
I want to alert the public that there's, the town trustees have noticed that there's going to be a delay in the opening of the scallop season in East Hampton Town waters until sunrise on Sunday, November 12th, 2023. Therefore, scallops may not be taken from trustee waters between 12:01 a.m. on Monday, October 17th, 2023, and before sunrise on Sunday, November 12th, 2023. The taking of scallops from trustee waters may begin at sunrise on Sunday, November 12th, 2023, and end at sunset on March 31st. I think that should be 2024. I want to let everyone know, still, please sign up for the Alert Me Now on the town's recreation page for our winter recreational programs signups. I want to let the board know that we are getting to a conclusion of the project for the John Behan Memorial Park in Montauk. We are just waiting for the engraved pavers to be delivered, but the signs are up, plaques are going in, grounds are looking good. We'll let more information know as far as a memorial service for that, but the park is looking good. I thank the town board and Mrs. Behan for their hard work on it. And
The sign is incredible. Whose idea was to make it look like pilings? Like
Mrs. Behan.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, it is the gateway to the docks.
Yeah.
Seemed appropriate, right?
Yeah, she's doing well on that. I want to let everyone know that the pickleball courts in Montauk and also the tennis courts, the pickleball court in Montauk and also the basketball courts in Montauk, they're past the 50%, so they're going to be actually paving them this coming week, but not doing the surface coating on them until the pavement actually cures. Exactly right. As far as the 395 Panago project, we have New York State DOT approval for the curve cuts. We're just finalizing that. And also, we look to actually potentially get our final determination from the planning board tomorrow. In regards to the Benson Preserve management plan, we are finalizing our draft for that management plan right now and are reviewing it. In regards, the town will be noticing the public hearing in regards to the management plan for the Benson Reserve, and we hope to obtain comments for the public as well. We'll be noticing that shortly. The town is also exploring the feasibility on pursuing action in Supreme Court to run in parallel with this public hearing to seek clarification of the 1994 decision of Justice Underwood. The idea would be to commence the action via an order to show cause seeking declaratory judgment. So these are options that the town is exploring right now. I'll have some more information to the board shortly on that. I want to let everyone know that New York State DOT has been out tree cutting onto the right-of-way on Napeague right now. It's going to be a long process, but they're out there working within the 30-day permits. They're moving ahead with that. And lastly, I'll let everyone know that next week we'll be closing on the Dodge property, which is the property in Parsons House in the heart of Springs, which will be great for the community and preservation of the town's heritage. That's all I have for the day.
Thank you, David. Sylvia?
Sure. I would like to take some time just to entice some folks, hopefully, to be additional members of the Anti-Bias Task Force and to serve on the Anti-Bias Task Force. It's an organization that meets once a month, but we do mighty things. The task force has written and published several brochures in English and Spanish containing information about bias issues and where to get help. We have worked with our local schools to engage students in contests related to bullying and to the meaning of the Anti-Bias Task Force. We've shown movies and documentaries at LTV and the East Hampton Library about civil rights movement, about conflict resolutions, and diversity. The Anti-Bias Task Force hosts the Diversity Show at LTV, and that features interviews with community members on a wide range of local topics that promote listening, understanding, acceptance, and kindness. If you are interested in becoming a member and being part of this amazing group, please contact my office at 631-324-2620. I'd also like to say that the Arts Council is planning another creative networking night for October 26th from 6 to 7:30 at the East Hampton Library, but I haven't confirmed and don't have a poster yet to post on our social media of the number of which artists are going to be presenting that night. But it's always a fun night and very entertaining, especially if they can find some artists that mix up with music and literature and painting. So hopefully I'll have more information before the 26th. And I'd just like to confirm that November 14th, a presentation at the town board work session to see the ideas for the Rick Del Mastro Wainscott Green, if that's possible to put on the agenda for, as I said, the November 19th.
14th.
I'm sorry, November 14th. So do you want me to give this to Ann or Peter? Do you want to?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, all right, I will let them know.
Great.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Sylvia. Kate?
Yes, Peter, I'll be brief on my liaison report. The Energy Sustainability Committee met yesterday. They passed some recommendations. One would be by 2025, banning gas leaf blowers in town altogether and just having everything be electrified. They spoke again of their presentation and the electrification recommendation that they made to the town board. I asked them to follow up on that. There was a recommendation to adopt the climate emergency declaration into the comprehensive plan. That emergency declaration will be part of the roadmap as well. So one way or the other, we may be looking at adoption into the comp plan. They spoke about waiting, again, as I said, on CCA. We spoke about our Build Ready program that we passed a resolution on to look at, NYSERDA looking at the possibilities of having properties in town ready to go with solar installations. And I want to also talk about the Spring CAC presented a forum on drinking water. We, besides the gentleman from the Suffolk County Water Authority, also had very interesting data and information from the Suffolk County Board of Health on how they test private wells, and also gave the results of the well testing that they did associated with the landfill, which came out with some very good results and small numbers of any kind of volatile chemicals being found in the water, well below any kind of standard. So the people of Springs were appreciative to have those results. It was recorded by LTV, and in the future, I'll be announcing when folks can take a look at that. I think it's interesting, whether you live in Springs or not, to see how the Board of Health tests our water and also what the Suffolk County Water Authority does as well. And that's what I have.
Great, thank you, Kate. So as the town board members know, and many in the community know, we have finally held our 375th anniversary parade.
It was so much fun.
The weather could not dampen the spirits of those who participated, although the turnout may have been actually less than the number of participants in the parade due to the projected weather and the fact that we've had, I think, something like 5 out of the last 6 weekends washed out, and so many of our second homeowners probably were not in town for the weekend either. That parade was led by our very own Chief of the Montaukets, Robert Farrow, driven in Arthur French's 1951 Mercury convertible, also known as the bathtub, because of the shape of it. It's almost like an old style bathtub. Rare car, one of only 1,000 made. I don't know how many still exist, but so that was fun. It was great to see so many community organizations enthusiastically participating, LVIS, the Garden Club, all the fire departments, so many different organizations, the Pride Group, you name it. Great fun. We had our very own town historian and town crier, Hugh King, was the MC of the event, which really made for a wonderful morning.
He may have been scripted, but he likes to go off the cuff.
If you're gonna have a roast, you should hire Hugh King.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the other weekend community event that I attended was the Farm Museum celebrating Bonnick. Again, second in a series, celebrating and drawing attention to the farmers and fishermen who settled and inhabited this area in the colonial times, how they ended up, living with the Montaukets. And at that occasion, there was a petition circulating for the governor to sign and reinstate the recognition of the Montaukett tribe. Our Assemblyman Fred Thiel and State Senator Anthony Palumbo managed to, again, have both houses of the state legislature pass a resolution to recognize the Montaukets. This has happened 5 times now. It's been vetoed 3 times by Governor Cuomo. Governor Hochul declined to sign it last time it went around. It's back again on her desk. That petition is urging her to sign that. I would like to put together a memorializing resolution urging the governor to sign, in addition to the fact that some of you I know have already signed that petition. If folks would like more information about signing the petition, they can contact my office. It's being circulated by others in the community, but anyway, I think it's appropriate. A state Supreme Court in 1910, as part of a developer's plan in Montauk, ruled that the Montaukett tribe no longer existed, that it was essentially extinct, and that the rights by treaty to them were therefore null and void. Travesty, in my opinion. So it's something we can urge to do to recognize the fact that we are still living among some of the original inhabitants, indigenous people here in our town. And we also had a meeting, Sylvia and I, with various folks, Drew Bennett, our consulting engineer, Michael Devonshire, preservationist, as well as members of not-for-profit for Brooks Park. We discussed next steps for Brooks Park, and the priority at this point is to secure the site, to essentially build a structure, a tent-like structure over top of the Brooks studio to prevent further weathering and damage to that structure. I was trying to envision what Mr. Bennett was talking about in terms of types of structures. And then I happened to drive down County Road 39, where in Southampton, near the car dealerships, where the driving range is, and they were in the process of erecting this giant tent-like structure, Quonset-like structure over top of their ice rink, which they're getting ready for the season. I was like, okay, I guess that's what drew me, something of that nature. He's working with Jeannie Carosa to see what might be available on public bid and process for immediately securing the structure. That's priority one there. We did have some additional discussion about restoration and portions of the property that might need reconstruction, the CPF eligible work, non-eligible work, those costs and funding sources, timing, and then discussion also about, in a separate track, moving forward on working out a license agreement with the interested not-for-profit for operation and management of the site. We're expecting to have the Motorola estimates to complete the additional emergency communication sites at Blue Bay, Camp Blue Bay in Springs, as well as the Northwest Brush Dump Tower. Those have been, we've been waiting for those for some time, but apparently Eddie Snell seems to think we'll be getting those estimates in the next week or so. That will be followed by bonding for those additional sites. And that's all I have for now. We have a few resolutions to do today, and I believe Kathy, you have the first.
I do. It's Resolution 2023-1355. It's to retain services and make a budget modification for the tax receiver's office. And we're retaining the services of Rebecca DeCipio at a cost not to exceed $20,000 for the 2023-2024 tax roll process, effective retroactively to October 12th. And also the budget modification, we're moving $20,000 from 3 budget lines, full-time salaries, travel, conferences, and dues and health insurance into the outside professional line for the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
Resolution 1356 is to hire an on-call a consultant to assist with planning department services, Lisa LaCroix, Fine Arts and Sciences, LLC. By Resolution 2023-1304, the town authorized retaining on-call planning services from outside consultants in order to provide assistance to the planning department in view of a shortage of personnel in the department, in order to continue to maintain effective and timely review of applications pending before the planning, architectural review, and the zoning boards. The town did retain AKRF and H2M to provide planning department with on-call services and is interested in adding an additional consultant, Lisa LaCroix Fine Arts Sciences, to provide additional on-call services. And Lisa LaCroix Fine Arts and Sciences has provided a proposal dated September 29th to provide services to the town, and resolved that the town board retains Lisa LaCroix Fine Arts and Sciences upon the following terms. Lisa LaCroix Fine Arts and Sciences shall be paid at an hourly rate of $200 per hour for services, and resolved that this resolution be deemed retroactive to and including October 10th, 2023. And also resolved that from a budget line in the B line, full-time salaries in the amount of $24,000 will be moved to outside professional in the amount of $24,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel and leases.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Thank you, LTV.